2024 to order. It is 9 a.m. Supervisor Gonzalez, can you lead us in the pledge? Thank you. Can I get an acknowledgement of certificate of posting?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? 5-0. Since this is a special board meeting, there are no public comment for items not on the agenda, and there's been a request to move closed session to the beginning of the meeting. It'll take us about 10 to 15 minutes. So we're going to go into closed session, sorry everybody, real quick for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll be right back out. And is there anything you need to state, David, before we go into closed session? Okay.
Public comment.
Oh, public comment, thank you. Let's open it up to public comment.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press star 9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment for closed session.
Okay, so we're going to go into closed session. We'll be back at about 9:15. Deputy
Yes, there
CAO will
was
be back.
no reportable action.
Okay. Okay, with that, then we're moving on to item 1.A, and this is receive presentation regarding the 2024 homeless point-in-time count. And who's going to be presenting? Enrique. Good morning.
Okay, well, good morning, members of the board and the public. My name is Enrique Arriola, Deputy Director for Health and Human Services Agency, Community Service and Workforce Development. Thank you for your support to addressing homelessness in San Benito County. Your commitment to the ongoing efforts, including today's presentation on the 2024 point-in-time homeless count, highlights the importance of understanding the scale and needs of homelessness in San Benito County. This biannual homeless count mandated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development is crucial not only for documenting number of individuals experiencing homelessness in San Benito County, but it also gathers in essential data that informs resource allocation and policy development. By prioritizing this critical issue, you are helping to ensure that our community can effectively respond to the challenges faced by our homeless residents. Your leadership plays a vital role in shaping a compassionate and comprehensive approach to homelessness, enabling us to work together towards solutions that foster dignity and support of all residents. Today's presentation will be led by Katrina McKenzie. She's the Executive Director of the Coalition of Homeless Service Providers. The coalition plays a critical role in addressing regional strategies relating to homelessness, ensuring that regional strategies align with the Lead Me Home plan to reduce homelessness, manages the homeless management information system, coordinated entry, the planning and execution of the point-in-time count, and among other regional priorities. Welcome, Katrina.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Enrique. So again, my name is Katrina McKenzie. Thank you for having us here today. I'm here with our Deputy Director, Nicole Sakihara, and our vendors, our consultants, Applied Survey Research, who has helped us with the point-in-time count this year. So we'll just move on into here. All right. So why do we do the point-in-time count? So like Enrique mentioned, Continuum of Cares, or COCs, are required by HUD to do this activity every other year. Some communities do it every year, but our community, which is composed of Monterey and San Benito County, does it every other year. This activity is led by the coalition in partnership with the San Benito County Health and Human Services, who we have partnered with Applied Survey Research, our consultants, to include governments, community-based organizations that helped us complete the 2024 point-in-time count. The data collected on these counts help us determine the level of federal funding that continues to fund COCs. Accurate counts enable better allocation and resources to meet the needs of people experiencing homelessness. And it helps us understand the scope and nature of homelessness and help COC design, implement effective programs and services. This data helps us to evaluate the effectiveness of existing interventions and identify gaps. These counts provide crucial information for policymakers to make decisions about homeless prevention and intervention strategies. By conducting these counts regularly, COCs can track changes in homelessness over time, allowing for better trend analysis and adjustments to our strategies. All right, so we're going to dive into some of these numbers. We conducted our count on January 31st. Let me stop real quick. This point-in-time count consists of 3 different activities. We do the sheltered point-in-time count, which is who are in the beds on the night of the 31st. Then we do our housing inventory count. How many beds do we have available on the 31st? And then at daylight, as soon as the sun hits the sky, we deploy out with our teams to count the unsheltered folks. So those are the three activities so far. San Benito County put together a team of 45 volunteers to include service providers, county staff, sheriff's office, PD, and they deployed from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. We do this in a blitz count to make sure that people aren't moving around. So we want to get them while they're still in one spot. The fourth activity of the point in time count includes a survey. So that helps us collect data on those experiencing homelessness. So we went out and pulled folks with lived experience to administer these counts. So 74 surveys were administered to pull this data on the right side. So we see that there was 621 folks that were unsheltered on the night of the 31st. 80% was unsheltered and 20% were sheltered. Let me catch up with you. Okay, so this is an overall increase from 2022 by 73.9%, equating to 264 additional folks. So again, we do it every other year. All right, so of those 74 respondents, we show that all right. I'm gonna get you guys another part of your thing. Is your your presentation? Because the special population seems off. Sorry about that, excuse me. Just double checking what we have here. Yeah, it's right. So we have 287 folks are experiencing chronic homelessness. Which in chronic homelessness is defined as having a disability and have lived in a shelter or place not meant for human habitation for 12 continuous months or 4 separate occasions within the last 3 years. That total 12 months. Of those 284 people, 84% 84 or 29% were sheltered and 203 or 71% were not. All right, from our survey respondents, they self-reported that majority of the respondents were between the ages of 35 and 44 years of age. But I'd like to draw you to our 55 plus age range with a combined total of 22% were experiencing homelessness at the time of the survey. 58% of them were men, 22% identified as white, and 45 identified as Hispanic or Latinx. Respondents report out that 84% were residents of San Benito County at the time they began experiencing homelessness. 68% have been experiencing homelessness for 1 year or more, and 12% recently began experiencing homelessness within 1 to 3 months of when the survey took place. 22% reported that this was their first time experiencing homelessness, which is an increase of 2% from the 22 point in time count. And it's a decrease of 18% in comparison to 2019 count. 27%, 20% is 27% is the majority of those surveyed were between the ages of 25 and 39 years old. 34% report that finances contributed to their homelessness, with 44% reporting out that drug and alcohol use was a contributing factor. 67% report that they cannot afford housing in San Benito County. When we're looking at the health of those experiencing homelessness, respondents report out that 60% struggle with depression, 37% have a substance use disorder, 36% have PTSD, 29% have a physical disability, 34% have a psychiatric or emotional condition, 33% have chronic health condition, 3% have Hep C or Hep B, and 50% have a disabling condition. So we're looking at the homeless population, we see that this is a highly vulnerable population that we're dealing with here. They also report that 60% are accessing government benefits, but 45% are not accessing any services. 36% do not want assistance, and 24% never applied. 16% believe that they do not qualify for benefits, and 8% do not have an ID or permanent address, or paperwork is too difficult to put together. So looking into the last 5 pit counts, we're looking over the courses of 2015 to 2014. This is how our trends change. The number of sheltered clients fluctuate over the years, with an overall decrease of 28.1% from 2015 to 2014 in the sheltered section. The overall number of unsheltered clients have increased by 3.9% from 2015 to 2024. So we see that change is being made. We look at last pit count, yes, there's an increase, but over the course of time, we're not looking at a huge increase here. Looking at it by jurisdiction, we show that majority of the folks in San Benito County reside in unincorporated areas. So why for the increase? There was an abrupt reduction in resources in our community. We lost emergency rental assistance program funded by both federal and state governments of about $4.5 million in March of 2023. Around that same time, our room key funding ended through the state of California, which closed approximately 75 beds in San Benito County. There was a delay in home key projects due to issues with the developers that took off 58 permanent supportive housing beds in the community. The end of the eviction moratoriums in 2022 took place after the count. So a lot of our funding was poured into our community due to COVID, and we were able to combat that. And then March of 2023, they said no more. So we had to start shutting things down. And then, post-pandemic, we have to reset our lives. And a lot of people are struggling and trying to recover from that, and that can be a contributing factor. But also the lack of affordable housing. Out here, you must make about $51 an hour to meet living wages for a 2-bedroom apartment. That equates to, this means an individual or family must be prepared to pay over $30,000 a year just to keep a roof over their heads. If landlords require households to make 3 times that rent To be considered eligible for renting their unit, this means households must bring in a minimum of $90,000 per year to qualify for housing. This doesn't mean that their housing is available for them either. So some upcoming projects. As a coalition, we want to make sure that you guys know we are committed to growing and fostering partnerships with local governments, the service provider network, and are actively seeking out funding for San Benito County to increase project builds and service deliveries. We have approximately 16 permanent supportive housing units that could equate to 58 beds for families experiencing homelessness through HAP COC funding. This project is underway with expectation to complete construction and move families in March of 2025 or sooner. There's a Chappelle project, which is 2 homes that are to be rehabilitated for their 5 bedrooms for families experiencing homelessness. And the Homeless Task Force and county staff had identified space on the Chappelle property to build more units for a mix of singles and individuals in the community. It's our goal here at the coalition and partnering with the County of San Benito to not stop addressing homelessness in our communities. And we need the support of local governments and service providers to develop a strategic and collaborative approach into serving this vulnerable population. I can take questions if you guys like.
Thank you. Let's first open it up to public comment.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card. On Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And in chambers, I do have Andy. Is she a card?
Good morning, folks. Good to see you all. I probably know more about homeless than anybody in this room, having worked in Soledad prison for 20 years. And I've actually even been homeless for a short period of time after I decided not to do a PhD at Oregon State in intertidal ecology and came back to Santa Cruz not knowing what to do. Tried to live in the woods at UCSC, and my first night out met a man wandering around talking to himself with an axe who said he didn't like people, and that was the end of my homeless experience. So it's not a safe thing to be a homeless person. I've talked to thousands of homeless people over the years, and in the prison, there's a close relationship between those who are incarcerated and those who are homeless. And part of the reason why your homeless population doesn't like to interact with agencies is a lot of them have dealt with the law before, and frankly, the law does a terrible job of dealing with homeless people. As a matter of fact, most of our institutions do a terrible job of dealing with homeless people. My father was and I'm glad that David Prentice is here today, because your assistant at the Planning Commission doesn't have the faintest idea what the First Amendment says. So I'm free as a citizen to talk about the issue however I'd like to talk about it, and it may or may not be relevant to you, and nobody has the right to stop me until my time is up. I still got 1 minute and 27 seconds, so I'm going to speak again. So, on the case of the homeless, it's really an indictment of the leaders of our county more than of the homeless, that so many of them don't want to interact with you, because you are not making heroic efforts to address their issues. Some of you have talked about getting more people arrested. That's the last thing you want, because a lot of these people are on parole. And when the police come and arrest them, they're going to be violated and they're going back to prison, and it'll cost $150,000 to incarcerate them. So it'll cost us money. What you want to do is do what they did in Salt Lake City, which is the mayor there realized it's more expensive to police homeless people than to house homeless people. You go out and you find the resources, whether it's through grants. You've got Robert Rivas, get a grant. Make the developers create ultra low cost housing. We've met all our other RENA numbers. You could solve the problem, but instead probably what you'll do is continue to wring your hands and pretend it's unsolvable. And that's just a tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I also have Elias Salinas.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Supervisors. In my opinion, so long as government and nonprofits are in charge of the houseless issue, they're not going to work themselves out of a job. It's a continuation of money coming in, and there's no resolving the issue. You have, you want to call them tiny homes out at the migrant camp. Very expensive. I have been coming here for years and talking about tiny homes. Tiny homes which can be built for less than $30,000. You buy them already, the kits already, and all you have to do is the infrastructure. Instead, you still haven't even finished what's out at the migrant camp, and it's cost millions of dollars. And the excuse is, oh, well, we have to work on the infrastructure. This didn't get ordered. Now we have to do this. Now we have to do that. There's always an excuse. In the meantime, you have the issue of all these people out there. They're unsheltered. It said 21 vets. What was the outreach for those 21 vets? Because there are funds out there are projects out there that will help the vets. So this group, why not target at least those 21 and get them something? Instead, where are they? So what if they have drug problems or they're an alcoholic? The resources are there. Start there. The survey was done in 28 days, so there were 74 surveys. How do you know you either double counted or how do you know you missed somebody? There's a lot of violence within this. A lot of the women that are homeless are continuously being sexually assaulted. There's a lot of issues, not just because they don't have a place to go for housing, but they don't even have the resources. They don't believe they have the resources to get help because you have one individual who actually is like in charge of the area, and you have to like serve that individual. There's like a system within this homeless encampments of how the system is run. And if it was 9% of the foster care, was that because they were aged out? And if they were 9% that were foster care, what did you do about them as well as like the 21? Did you concentrate to help that 9%? Start somewhere, get some results. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
I have no further public comment.
Okay, bringing it back to the board. Are there questions from the board members? Supervisor Zanger?
Yeah, I have some questions about the data survey. You want to step up? Thank you. Hi. All right. Well, first of all, just appreciate everyone that had a hand in this, and appreciate you bringing the data to us and all. I had some questions. So on some of this information, was it like a multiple choice, or was it like on slide 5 where there's a lot of information about what led to homeless and the issues? Are they given multiple choice options, or is it how does it work, the survey?
Yeah, it is hard.
Yeah, this is James with Applied Survey Research. Yeah, the survey is a 8.5 by 14 legal page document. And it's a combination of open-ended responses, closed responses, both of single response and then multiple response questions.
Okay. And then, so there's volunteers that go out and give the survey, or?
Yeah, so we employ a peer-to-peer survey methodology. So we recruit, typically it's folks that are currently or recently experiencing homelessness, and we pay them to administer the surveys. So the idea being we're gonna get more truthful and accurate responses with someone that, who's being surveyed might be familiar with or has some level of shared experience.
Okay, got it. So I'm just looking at the data from 2022 compared to 2024. I'm a little confused. So in 2022, it said 85% of the homeless had been here for less than a year. And then in 2024, it says 8% have been here for less than a year. So that flip seems, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me. Does that make sense?
Which one is that? On
For a percent of people that have been here for been in the county for less than a year. So in 2022, it was 85%. So that means, that would indicate, a lot of them just arrived in the county, right? Less than a year ago. And then in 2024, it flipped to 8% have been here for less than a year.
Sorry, not from the audience. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. I will, if I have to warn you again.
Yeah, there was in 2024 there was one question, and one of we realized in 2022 there was a little confusion. Katrina mentioned it earlier that this is it's kind of a unique continuum of care that includes both Monterey and San Benito counties. So when we were looking back at that same question, because it kind of caught our eye too, our thinking was that there's probably some confusion amongst those that are completing the survey of whether they're talking about having lived in San Benito or Monterey County. So I think what our thought is that there's some confusion in how the respondent was reading that question. So I think in the actual report, we kind of just showed the place of residence at the recent episode of homelessness, which is 84% that had previously lived in San Benito counties. So we showed that on a 1 year trend, just because we feel like that better captures what's happening in San Benito County. And then we also kind of compared that to some of our neighboring counties, in that the place of residence at time of homelessness in the county is pretty consistent across most counties that in California, in that 70 to 85% of the population are really those that are experiencing homelessness in the county. That population, that percentage is pretty steady within.
But there was confusion in 2022 with the questions.
Correct. Yeah.
So I guess the 2022 data.
I'm sorry. If you're going to have a conversation, you need to step into the lobby.
The 2022
Thank
data,
you.
we sort of just can't really look at it seriously, or how do we deal with that if there's confusion with the questions?
Well, it's just that one question related to residency prior to homelessness, because like I was kind of mentioning, it was just related to I think the question that we asked in the survey is which county were you living at prior to experiencing homelessness?
Mm-hmm.
And because it's a two-county, Monterey and San Benito, I think there was a confusion there. So just in that one question, whereas, in the remainder of the survey, there's not any county-specific information that could have led to that confusion.
Right.
So one of the efforts that we led this year is really just, isolating the San Benito survey and just having separate survey instruments for San Benito and Monterey County to avoid that confusion.
Okay, got it. So as far as there's two questions here on slide 5. Primary condition that led to homelessness, and then obstacles to obtaining permanent housing.
Mm-hmm.
So the primary condition, I guess the largest percentage there was alcohol and drug use at 44%. And then obstacles to obtaining permanent housing, I guess that's not listed as an obstacle at all. I don't really understand that. So because we have obstacles, and the biggest percent there is can't afford rent. I guess was alcohol and drug use, I guess, presented as an option in obstacles to obtaining permanent housing, or just as an option that led to homelessness in the survey?
I can check, but I'm almost positive those are. I'm pretty sure those are. those are listed in both as options and obstacles to obtaining permanent housing and primary cause.
Okay, so I guess it just didn't
But
make
it might have
the
just
list
not been
on.
the top response in the obstacles to obtaining permanent
So top
housing.
response that led to homelessness, but it didn't make the list on top responses that is an
Correct.
obstacle to getting out of
Correct.
homelessness.
And
Okay.
I can see if I can, I don't know if we have a copy of the survey instrument in the report, but I can look into that as well.
Okay. Okay, and then just generally, last question. So from 2022 to 24, looking at almost doubling
Yeah.
the number, is that, I guess, is that standard across the state?
I wouldn't say it's standard. No, I mean certainly having fluctuations isn't uncommon. You know, I think Katrina kind of mentioned there's a little bit of the point in time count. It is a singular point in time count. There's a lot of variables that go into it, and then obviously, which is the problems are kind of exacerbated by COVID and having that difficulties in the last couple years. But I'd say across the state, there's a report that's kind of released that tracks continuums of care. I don't know off the top of my head how many experienced that much of an increase, but it wasn't the largest increase in the state. There are several. If I had to guess, throughout the counties in California and continuums of care, I think there's probably about 5 to 10 that experience kind of similar increases would be an estimate.
Okay. And then just my last question was as far as the peer-to-peer sort of survey taking, understand the intention there with the trying to get more truthful answers. Do you think there's any, I guess, would there be any incentive though for someone, if it's peer-to-peer and their friends, to sort of, encourage different answers that would maybe help them get different services? I mean, do you see that being an issue at all with?
I mean, they go through a training process, and one the folks that we're working with are typically recommended to us by service providers, providers that work closely with them and then recommend them, hey, this would be a good candidate for a surveyor. So we have that layer, and then they also undergo a training process. But there's really no incentive for untruthful responses. I mean, but at the end of the day, it is self-reported data, and any self-reported data has that level of, we get what the respondent is telling us. We actually do inform the surveyors that, these are self-reported answers, and just to take in whatever information that they're sharing, that it's not the job of the surveyor to kind of interpret and make decisions for you. But to your point, yeah, there is with any self-reported data, there are limitations in terms of how you can interpret that.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thank you. Supervisor Sotelo.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One, so with this point in time count, is it just the count, or is there any types of, where you're trying to connect people with resources at the same time, or that would be a completely different endeavor at that time, or is this just focus? Because some of my questions, before I go too deep into some of my questions, if the purpose of this is just to get the point in time count, then some of my questions are irrelevant, really. I mean, they're relevant, but they're not relevant for right now.
Right, so it's a bliss count that's observational only. There's not supposed to be any interaction with anybody sleeping, or that we think that they're supposed to be sleeping between those time frames. So it's literally like us going out and 1, 2, 3, 4. I believe this is a male, I believe this is a female type thing. There's no interaction, and that is HUD's guidelines.
Okay. And then what about with the surveys? Is that a time where, again, is it just about collecting the data with the survey? And again, it's not. So you've identified the 21 vets, or the, the youth or the families or whatever, specific population it is. That is the goal of that, is to just do the surveys and not get into
Services.
resource, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, the answer is yes. There is no service interaction. These are people with lived experience who are administering the surveys, and we tell them your information's not going to be shared. Your location's not going to be shared. We use just maybe the last of their social so that we can make sure there's no duplication and like a name, but that's not shared with the coalition. It's not shared with the service providers. It only goes to our consultants for the data, compiling the data.
So you essentially are doing this count and doing this survey, bring it back to us, present it, and then we, at another meeting or whatever, would decide, okay, now based on this data, what is kind of our plan
What is our
for
outreach?
addressing?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. In some scenarios, like in Monterey County, when we do youth counts, it's harder to get youth. So they might throw an event and ask them to come to do the count or surveys. And in that case, they might do some sort of outreach in that, but not for the general whole population.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Supervisor Zenger touched on it a little bit, but I'm just wondering, because you represent Monterey and San Benito, how do our numbers compare to, say, Monterey County? And I mean, I'm talking kind of like, I know it's apples and oranges, but
Right.
you know, we're at, you know, some of the, just percentage wise, is it comparable? Are we way higher, way lower? Just general.
It's comparable.
It is comparable.
It's comparable.
And so
Our
their numbers
went-
have really increased over the last few years as well.
Yeah, since 2022, yes. Our 20, so we didn't do a 2020 count, so because of COVID.
Gotcha.
And we didn't, we came back online in 2022. 2022? Yes, 2022. So our last count was 2019, so from the 2019 count to, no, 2022. Yeah, so, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm trying to gather my thoughts. It is a significant increase. We're having the same conversation with Monterey County as we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that just raises so many questions for me. And so, like I said, some of my questions are not going to be, they're very relevant, but not for the point in time count or the survey. So thank you so much for doing it. It's very eye-opening, and we obviously have a lot of work to do here.
Yeah, and I would just encourage you all, we'll work closely with Health and Human Services to make sure that like the surveys is reviewed by people like you who have vested interest in that, so that we can get the type of data that you guys want to see going forward.
Oh, thank you very much for that.
Moving over here, Supervisor Kosmicki.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Crow. How's it going, Katrina? Thank you for being here. So the 74 surveys, can you remind me again how the survey, maybe I missed this while I was taking notes, how the surveyed residents were chosen among the larger pool?
Yeah, so I'm going to do my best to explain the methodology and pull somebody up if I do not a great job. So we'll say if we're in a room like this, and I'm the surveyor, we're going to do probably every 3 people. We're not going to survey everybody in this room. We're going to go to a location every 3, every 3, every 3, and then move out. Can I do an okay job? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, there's also we try and take into account different experiences. So if there's high vehicularly housed numbers in a given year, we try to have some quotas set for those, and then also typically youth have a youth quota as well, and then also look at things regionally and establish, you know, both an unincorporated and regional kind of quotas, loose quotas. It's a little bit of a tricky target because we're basically, you know, it's such a condensed time frame that as we're finalizing our numbers, surveys are already in the field. So there's a little bit of a juggling as we're going and moving things around to get a solid number for San Benito County.
Okay, because as you mentioned earlier, you don't go out necessarily and have contact with everybody, but I guess what I'm getting at is how do you then, if you're not having contact, and this isn't skepticism, I'm trying to get my head around it, what's the process for, if you're not making direct communication with most of these folks, because that's against the HUD guidelines as mentioned, like she said, you're just picking, and then it's okay to go up to those folks and say, hey, are you willing to do a survey? I'm just trying to get a handle on it so that I can understand the randomness of the choices. Like you said, you're getting a certain number of people in vehicles and youths and all that, but I'm trying to get my handle on the randomness of it.
Yes, so it's really there's kind of two separate processes. There's the point in time count, which is really the main activity that we're doing, and what we found and really across the country, there's just not enough time. In a perfect world, it would be great if as we're coming across every individual that we see on the street to do this in real time, do the interview. Unfortunately, that would, the survey takes about 20 minutes to administer, so there's just not enough time to get the point in time count done. So then what has come of that over the years is that there's been this desire and want to have additional information, more geared towards, local issues and how we can move people out of homelessness or what are potential barriers. Okay. So that then what arose out of that was the survey component, which happens at a later phase. So typically there's the point in time count, which is a single day of, and then we have a little bit more time, over let's say 3 weeks, to kind of to do the survey process. And then to your point, what we typically how we have the survey administered is we look at both current, preliminary data, preliminary results, and then also previous year's information, and try and establish loose quotas where we can get different regions of the areas covered, as well as get as diverse of a population as we can. And then to Katrina's point, in larger groups, we employ an every third person method, so at least there's a little bit of a random group dynamic as you go to the every third person.
Can somebody speak to the reliability of the answers given on the surveys? Just given the one that jumps out, I think, is mental illness in particular, and the self-acknowledgement of having mental illness seems to be an obvious barrier. So those to me, it seems like there's an inherent skewing of the data results just simply based on that alone. Like somebody's not going to acknowledge they have a mental illness issue, and then so we're having to trust that whatever, I don't have it right in front of me, there was a percentage you gave for mental illness, and it seemed frankly low to me. In reality, I believe it's much higher than that. So how reliable are these answers basically overall? Because of some of these areas, they're going to have an inherent incentive, or they're just not going to have the ability to answer correctly.
Yeah, and get back to the earlier point that I mentioned, and this is the limitation of self-reported data, but it's also I also personally I like looking through self-reported data, because this is what the person feels and what they're reporting. So I think you're right. I mean, especially in things as complicated as mental health, you're gonna face those
and drug addiction probably as well.
Drug addiction, yeah, absolutely. And then we have similar issues with domestic violence, and things like that. So it's those are complicated things, and especially someone to self-report can be a dicey issue. So
what is if we know that at least some of the responses and the overall characterization of the picture is not reliable, then sort of what is the purpose of the survey?
I mean, it gives a snapshot, a glimpse, and I also think it's a piece of the puzzle. I think this is a point in time data source, but I think we can also ideally, and this might be a question for Enrique or Katrina, that we can we're pulling in other sources experiences that shelter staff have. I know there's a pretty robust data system that the shelters have as well, that they have access to. So I think just in conjunction with a few of these different sources, we can get a better glimpse of the overall picture.
And then sheltered versus unsheltered, the 80-20, what would be examples of, so sheltered, obviously, unsheltered, we know what that is, if somebody's living in a tent or wherever it may be without. Sheltered would be, is that an RV? Is that, we know homeless shelters, I'm assuming, is that sheltered or is that not sheltered?
Yeah, so for the point in time count definition, it's any transitional housing unit and any emergency shelter. Those are the only two. There's also safe havens, which are included in the definition, but that doesn't exist here. So to your point, RVs are considered vehicularly housed, which fall under the unsheltered category. So that's RVs, tents, makeshift shelters.
So when you're doing the count, because a lot of people live in RVs, whether they're homeless or not homeless, when you're doing the counts, and Katrina had mentioned to an extent, it's not a guess, but you're doing your best to get an educated guess. Do you count all the RVs? Do you count RVs that are parked in driveways? Do you count, how does that picture work?
Yeah, so we have, it's kind of covered in the training, but we have various tip sheets of what constitutes an RV that falls within the definition used for the point in time count. And then, one of the things that the survey helps us do is it establishes an estimate of the number of folks that are typically living in an RV. So let's say a team encounters an RV on the day of the count. If they can see individuals in the RV, they're instructed to document how many individuals that they see. If they don't see any individuals, but clear signs of habitation within that RV, those are then multiplied. We use a multiplier, which is basically the average number of persons living in an RV, and we use that information to kind of provide our best guess of the number of individuals experiencing homelessness in RVs.
Do we have a breakdown of how many of the 621 are maybe RV residents?
Yeah, there's we do. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. So vehicles, we show it rolled up with cars, RVs, and vans, and it was approximately 8% of the overall.
Okay. And then the correlation to, lastly on the questions, so I know being on the Curriculum of Care Leadership Council, we now do use the point in time. Before it was kind of a generic percentage, but as far as a correlation to the funding that goes to the COC and then is allocated out to the two counties, what is the, from the state and feds, is there also, can you explain the correlation with funding? Because is there an incentive to have a higher number, I guess is what I'm getting at, because we're gonna get more money basically if we have a higher number.
I don't want to say there's an incentive, but when there are higher point in time counts, their funding does increase. When our counts go lower, they do decrease.
Okay.
So it's a non-win in either way. You know,
Gotcha.
if we report out that our numbers went down, we lose funding to current projects. we get higher pit counts, everyone's upset, but we get more funding.
Got it. Okay. So I'd similar sort of sentiment. I get this is not a perfect science at all. This is a survey. It's just, it did jump out to me that, I know you sort of explained in a way that the flipping of the numbers, I understand going up, but 75% or so is a lot to me. Just based on my own observation in the community, again, I'm not out going in all the riverbed encampments every day, but it just seems like a big jump. What really jumped out in the data was, and where I'd like to see maybe more consistency going forward and how, it seems like you're all very professional and credible at what you do, but maybe from every 2 years or how often that we stick with the same processes, just so that there's more consistency.
Right.
Because this isn't a perfect science. We're all acknowledging that we had essentially 350 for 2 years ago and 85% just going off what the data said. So that meant 54 people, homeless people, were quote unquote from San Benito County 2 years ago. That number, according to the data, just 2 years later, there's supposedly 528 homeless people who are from this area. And so
Right.
that just doesn't make any sense to me.
I would like to explain what happened with that, and we're gonna ensure that stuff like this doesn't happen again. When we're looking at the survey, the question was, do you have it here? Yes. The first question is, where were you living at the time of your most recent episode of homelessness? And then it's like Monterey County, San Benito County, other county in California, out of state. The follow-up question was, how long have you lived in Monterey County? And it just didn't get shifted. So people said less than a year, right? Is that what we're saying? It didn't get switched over. That was an oversight on all of us, that it didn't get switched to say San Benito County.
Got it. So that nothing's going to be perfect in all this. I appreciate all the volunteers. Our curriculum of care does a great job. Just going forward, if we can maybe focus on whether
Absolutely.
it's using the same consultant or whatever it is to have, have processes that are as consistent as we can be, so that the numbers are more explainable from year to year.
Right. And I do want to say that in 2022, our methodology all around did kind of change because we were in COVID and we couldn't do all the outreach and gather all the teams that we could have before, because you couldn't be in cars with strangers, or it had to be family members, or, there were changes made, but we diverted back to the original methodology since I came on board in 2014.
Got it.
So it has been consistent with the exception of 2022 and that oversight, and that is something that we will ensure that there's many eyes on it, so that these mistakes don't happen again.
But I think overall there is an acknowledgement that 621 is not an exact number. Because a lot of people use that number on whatever side you're on the issue, and they use it as sort of a crutch to say, well, that means there's 580 people that are, even though most people don't want to go to the homeless shelter, there's 580 people. What are you going to do with them? And that's all. I know it's not zero, but I don't think there's any reason to believe that it's exactly 621 or necessarily around that. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just make a quick comment. So you're absolutely right. And the count is really based on who do we make contact, or at least who do we observe that morning of. What I could say also, when you look at the 2022 count and this count, we had 3 to 4 different outreach teams. The river, we had 1 in 2022. This time we had 3. We had a lot more greater coverage. And also in some of the other census tracts, we made sure that we target every census tract in the county, even South San Benito County, which didn't document anyone. But the thing is, the importance to really document each census tract. And I also think that along the reasons that we mentioned earlier, this count was a count that I believe is a lot more thorough. And I'm sure there's more that we just didn't capture that morning.
Thank you, Enrique.
Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Gonzalez.
Thank you. Well, I'm not questioning the validity of the survey or the numbers. I thank you for that. My concern is more the increase from 2022 to 2024. And for me, that's significant. That's a 264 individual increase in the point and count time. And that means 264 individuals that are now homeless that weren't homeless 2 years ago. And that concerns me. So I guess a generic question, what is the county paying for this survey? What's it costing us?
So we paid for the survey, which includes the executive summary and also the full report, 26,000. What I could also say that every other count since 2011, it's always been under 12, 10,000 or so. But this year, we decided that there's value to having the full report, so the fee did go up to 26,000.
Okay, it's a more comprehensive reporting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. So then I guess my next question is, what are we as a county learning from the survey and the numbers? And what are we doing to help alleviate this problem? And I particularly want to capitalize on the comment that Elia made about the tiny homes. What are we doing with that, Enrique? Because I remember this conversation 4 years ago when I was elected on the board. We knew we had the tiny homes out there, yet 4 years later, we still haven't done anything with them. So what's happening with that, and how can those tiny homes help us utilize reducing these numbers?
So the project that you're referencing right now, which Katrina also mentioned, 16 total units, part of the delay initially was the home key process, that there were just delays that were really initially out of our control. Even now, there's been funding issues that we've come back to the board because we had a need to have additional funding, which the board, thank you very much, approved 1 or 2 different allocations to help meet our need. Our contract with the state is to complete this project by this December, and working very closely with Steve and his team with RMA, and we are on track. At the end of this month, October, I think the 28th or so, we're gonna get the bulk of the units delivered. They're being built offsite, so if you go there, there's 5 units there right now, but the rest are being built right now, and in the middle of November, the remaining units will be delivered. They'll be set to the foundation, and on a contract with Home Key with the state, we have an occupancy requirement by the 31st of March of 2025, and I anticipate full occupancy before then.
Well, I look forward to that report. Thank you. Thank you for that update.
Okay, I'm going to come back to Supervisor Sotelo.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. Is the point in time count, is it always January 31st, or is it always in the winter months?
It's always at the end of January, the last week, last 10 days of January.
Do you think that if we did the point in time count, like in summertime or another time, that our numbers would be increased?
So as a nation, this is a HUD requirement that we take at the last 10 days of January. I believe there's a count that can happen. I'm not sure if we have the ability to do it ourselves. But as a HUD requirement, it's done the last 10 days of January.
I'm just wondering, when I look at the numbers and it shows, I think it was 89 families that are experiencing homelessness. But of the 89 families, 100% of them are sheltered. And I know that in this county, we have some shelters that are available in the winter, but they're temporary. They're only available for a certain amount of time.
Correct.
And then they turn into other types of housing. And so I'm just curious, where do those, families that are staying in kind of those temporary winter shelters, are they experiencing unsheltered kind of situations in the off months that are not where we have kind of our winter housing availability?
So our experience whenever we provide services to homeless families, most of them are not out in the streets. They're not in their vehicles, in their RVs. Most of them are couch surfing with a relative. And that's been our observation. From time to time, we do encounter some families living in their van, in their vehicle, but the majority are not. From my experience, I would say it's maybe 5% or so, very small percentage. So during the off months, in the winter shelter program, we offer rapid rehousing. There's a caseworker, social worker that's assigned to them with a goal to get them into permanent housing as quickly as possible. Now, 3 to 4 months is really not enough time. It really is not enough time. So we have some successes, and for the remainder, they do go back to usually their primary setting before that, whether it's with a relative, a friend, and so forth. So yeah, it's complicated, and we just don't have the resources to have year-round interim housing for the families. I hope we had a project that was really comprehensive to meet our needs.
Thank you, Enrique. Now, with the families, how do you, are they calculated if it's a family of 4 or a family of 3 or 5, whatever it is that counted as part of the counts to get to the 621?
Yes, but I do want to make a correction. You mentioned 89 families. It's actually, the number that you mentioned, it's household members. So that year, we served about 20, maybe 21 or so families that comprise that number that you referenced earlier.
Okay.
So those are the...
Thank you for clarifying that, because I thought it was 89 family units, not 89 family members.
Yeah.
So, thank you. So it
units.
really was about 20 families.
20, and in some cases, a family might find housing after the first month, so we still have a couple, 2-3 months, so we'll bring in other families. So usually we service 20 to start off, and we end up maybe 22 or so
Okay,
for those
thank
that
you.
find housing early.
Thank you. I really appreciate that clarification. That's all my questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
coming back to Supervisor Kosmicki.
Sorry, I'll be
It's
quick.
okay.
Something I
Okay.
thought of, it'll relate to the following topic. So, do we have a rough idea or precise idea of how many these homeless residents live in the riverbed or other sensitive habitats?
I am sure we could get you some good data from the river, because we did have 3 teams that went down the river, and anytime we encountered a tent or an individual, we documented through the 123 survey app. So we could perhaps gather, but I could tell you my group along the river, portion of the river, we documented about 65-ish or so during there's two other groups, so I don't have that data, but I could tell you.
Is it close to half of the overall population, or a third, or any kind of rough estimate?
I would say not close to half. I would say probably 25% or so, but we could certainly follow up with that.
Okay, great, appreciate it, thank you.
Okay, so a lot of great questions, because you guys checked off my questions, and so I'm not going to repeat them. But I am going to go back to a little bit of the counts on your slide from the 2015 to the 2024. We keep talking about how we've jumped from 2022 to 2024, and COVID was a skipped year, which I understand. And even 2022, we were still in COVID, so I could even understand the low count there. Why is 2019 so drastically low prior to COVID? What changed? Did we have a different survey mechanism? I wasn't on the board, I don't know. What happened? Because it seems like 2015 to 2024, we're hovering about the same. What's happened in between?
Okay, what I recall, because I was part of the planning process and still with Applied Survey Research, our community, nonprofits, one of the things that I recall, that week it rained a lot. I remember it rained a lot, so when we had gone out, it was harder to reach them. So my assumption is that they moved to other places to protect themselves from the rain. So that's what I remember being a factor.
Okay. I appreciate that, because it just doesn't really, I agree with my colleagues, it's a snapshot. You don't really know if you got everybody. There's some calculating, but it just seems weird that the 2022 makes sense because of COVID. It didn't make sense for the 2019. It just seemed odd. When it comes to, I know, how long has this company been working with us? How many years? How-
Since I've been involved 2011.
Okay.
Remember
So
probably
pretty
before that.
consistent. That's good to hear. And we're trying to find the consistency because I'm very much in support of what
Absolutely.
Supervisor Kosmicki is saying. We need that consistency. But why aren't we talking about, because in my understanding, Bay Area homelessness has been pushed down from San Jose into Morgan Hill, from Morgan Hill into Gilroy, and just through attrition, I understood that it was coming to Hollister based on some of the information from the public that I've received. Why aren't we collaborating more and understanding the homeless population of our northern county and the cities and what they're doing and how it affects our county?
You know, what I could say is this, we work very closely with our partners, and also we are a service provider of different programs from interim, emergency, permanent supportive housing. We don't quite see that we have an abundance of homeless individuals that are just coming to this county. We have heard of it, it does happen, but I don't think it happens to the degree that we think it is.
Gotcha.
At least from the service standpoint that we provide services, I haven't quite seen that. Now, does it make sense to also look at northern partners? Most definitely. We have engaged with some of the partners more in the South Santa Clara County Compassion Center.
Mm-hmm.
We had actually a couple of meetings. One, we visited a safe parking program to better understand their process, their population, how they manage this program. They've also presented to the homeless task force to learn more of their services. And I've most recently had a conversation with them. They did secure some property, and they've offered a couple of acres for a possible safe parking program here locally in San Benito County. So we could continue those type of discussions with that.
That's great to hear. I'm really happy to hear that. And you answered the question about why we went from a 2-year to a 3-year, and that was COVID, so that's fine. And then my last question was, actually, we already covered that one too. So good job on all the questions, you guys, because you got all my questions covered. Thank you so much. If anybody has any further follow-up questions, are we good? Thank you so much. I appreciate, all the work you guys do. Understanding this it's a lot to put your head around, but having some data really does help us
Absolutely.
start to address what our homeless needs are. So thank you so much.
And thank you for your support.
Mhm. Okay, with that, we are going to move on to item 1B, unless we need a break. Is everybody okay? 5 minutes?
Yeah, that'd be
Okay,
great.
we're going to do a 5-minute break, and then we'll be right back and we'll start 1B. And we're moving on to item 1B, and this is receive the staff presentation on proposed enforcement, clean actions, and policy to address encampment in San Benito County. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, Supervisors. My name is Selena Stotler. I'm the Integrated Waste Manager with the county's Resource Management Agency. I have had the pleasure of working with various county departments on the abatement of solid waste and vehicles from the San Benito riverbed, and more recently on the development of today's draft encampment policy that is before you. We are collectively excited for today's discussion and motivated for potential next steps to better sustain the well-being of our riverbed and the county at large. The slide before you includes recent legislative actions taken in regard to enforcement against camping and sleeping in public spaces. Governor Newsom's executive order in August specifically encourages local governments to take urgent action to humanely remove encampments from public spaces, prioritizing encampments that most threaten public health and safety. As a result, the board adopted an ordinance on August 27th banning the use of certain areas of public rights-of-way as sleeping or living accommodations. Prior to encampment removal, it is crucial that the county develop a policy that clearly defines roles and outlines staff procedures. As part of today's presentation, I will be providing a summary of the most recent San Benito River cleanup efforts and challenges. County Council will then present on the draft encampment cleanup policy and key considerations, and following the introduction, each department thereafter will provide background on their role within the policy. And to conclude, we will have a summary of our recommendations and look forward to a Q&A discussion as well as public comment. I would like to acknowledge the various county departments and staff that have contributed to the encampment cleanup policy working group, including Behavioral Health, County Council, GIS, Health and Human Services, Resource Management Agency, and the Sheriff's Office. Not listed here are the various City of Hollister partners and stakeholders who participated in early discussions, including the Hollister Fire Department, Hollister Police Department, and Hollister Public Works. As a significant portion of the county's encampments can be found in the riverbed, and there is an abundance as well of illegal dumping, the county has historically focused cleanup efforts along the riverbed, specifically between San Juan Road and Hospital Road. Various cleanup efforts occurred between March of 2023 through June of 2024 with the support of county contractors Smith & Enright and Broncos Towing. Recology also contributed drop-off boxes for the collection of solid waste, metal, and tires. I'd like to note that the costs listed here do not account for staff time other than some program coordination from Health and Human Services, nor did the cost account for any active encampment cleanup, for which we anticipate over 100 encampments within the riverbed. The source of funding was the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funding. And prior to that funding source, cleanup was primarily funded by the County of San Benito with some contribution from private property owners. I have two maps that are also available interactively online thanks to Renee with GIS. The first one being a map of the most recent point in time count. The dots in yellow represent encampments that fall within the county's jurisdiction, and the green dots represent those within the City of Hollister's jurisdiction. Based on the point in time count, we anticipate over 100 encampments along the riverbed, again between San Juan Road approximately to Hospital Road. What perhaps cannot clearly be seen through this map is the challenging terrain and the abundance of access points. The second map illustrates the various parcel ownerships, which does present some unique considerations for cleanup efforts. The parcel in red represents the City of Hollister-owned parcels, and the dark purple represents the county-owned parcels of the riverbed. As you can see, the majority of the riverbed does fall within private property. In addition to private property being a consideration, the expansive area of the riverbed creates opportunity for infinite access points that are not easily monitorable by cameras. And fences and even concrete barricades to restrict access have been proven to be ineffective. Over the past decade, reoccurring encampments and lack of riverbed patrol have been a big challenge. Removal of encampments occur and the encampment simply move to a different part of the riverbed, creating a cycle of ongoing cleanup costs. Another challenge is funding. With 100+ encampments, cleanup will surely be a considerable cost to the county. And at this time, it is unknown. A thorough site assessment could provide staff with the and the board with a more adequate estimate of cleanup costs, but still funding sources will need to be determined. Lastly, another challenge for both patrol and for cleanup is the riverbed's terrain. Not only is it vast in width and length, but the vegetation and terrain create difficulty for vehicles to enter and exit the area, and furthermore, rain and waterways will play a factor in cleanup scheduling. We ask that these challenges be considered as the presentation progresses, and with that, I will go ahead and pass the torch to Rebecca with County Council.
Thank you, Selena, and good morning, everybody. So as Selena had just mentioned, there was a change in policy and case law that allowed for enforcement of ordinances regulating encampments on public policy. And San Benito County recently enacted Chapter 11.8 for the ban of the use of certain areas of public right-of-ways as sleeping or living accommodations in August to go into effect of September this year. The policy is a collaborative approach across departments to protect safety and property, maintain property and cleanliness, facilitate safe and respectful cleanups, and prevent the accumulation of trash and unclaimed items. And the procedure starts with complaints or reports of the encampments to HHSA or GIS, and the lead agency, which is going to be discussed, will determine the order of the enforcement. The site is assessed with the sheriff's office and has WAPR trained staff to assess and evaluate the site, and HHSA and behavioral health perform outreach, contact service providers as necessary to ensure that people are aware of any upcoming abatements of the facility or area. Staff performing the assessment would identify necessary next steps and provide direction to the departments to collaboratively address the cleanup. Notice is posted at least 72 hours before any cleanup were to begin, so either at the same time as outreach or at a separate event, depending on who needs to be there. Meaning whether the sheriff's office is available for one or the reach out is another day or earlier. The removal for cleanup section, there's the bagging, tagging, and storing of personal property that's not contaminated, which is a highlighted section of the policy that was attached to the agenda item. For those that are not disposed of, while others that were outlined as well are disposed of and removed from the location or facility. Post cleanup, the notice is left for 5 days. However, I will highlight that the county is not liable if a third party were to take down the sign, because we're not having someone just watching the signs the entire time. If someone else were to take it down, that's outside of our control. For the bag tagged and stored items, they're kept for 90 days, and then they are subject to disposal after that time if they're unclaimed. This policy is for all county property impacted and cleared. It also provides for the CAO's office to update it from time to time based on what is needed for implementation. Also highlighting, it does not create a right of action against the county for not complying with the policy as long as the removal is compliant with the laws and regulations. It's intended to implement a higher level of service for interaction with all the, and the PEH there stands for persons experiencing homelessness. Some considerations as we hear from the departments coming up will be that it's unclear or unsure of which lead agency will head as far as managing direction, delegation, contracts, and general management and maintenance of the program. There's also the unknown capacity for personal property storage. Currently, our departments are not able to accommodate this internally. There are external contractors to consider, so that's a consideration. The departments would require additional staff and funding to effectively implement this, and so that's another consideration, as well as the private property aspect. On one hand, that many of the encampments are located on private property, and primarily on private property, and permissions or authorizations would be required from those private property owners if that were to be an area that's also being cleared. Payments are also something to be addressed, whether that be handled through private property owners before or after, how the county would like to have that, or the board would recommend having that addressed. Now I'm going to hand it off to Health and Human Services.
Good morning, Honorable Board. My name is Amanda Geip, the Assistant Director for the Health and Human Services Agency. With complex collaborative policies, understanding roles and responsibilities is critical to the success of the project. The mission, vision, and values of HHSA is to promote self-sufficiency of individuals and families through a responsive and accessible system that centers dignity and provides services efficiently with respect and compassion. HHSA is comprised of multiple divisions within the agency: Children and Adult Services, Public Assistance, Public and Environmental Health. Environmental health may play a role in this policy to support cleanup efforts on private property and serve in an advisory capacity around health and safety. And last, Community Services and Workforce Development, or CSWD. And CSWD, as you heard earlier, is where HHSA has centralized our housing and homeless programs to strategically align to ensure we are leveraging all funding opportunities available to individuals experiencing homelessness in our community. From calendar year 2023 to present, we have completed 52 days of street outreach and 3 outreach events where over 314 contacts were made with persons experiencing homelessness. Additionally, approximately 590 community members received a variety of services ranging from shelter stays, hotel vouchers, interim or permanent supportive housing. A critical component to addressing the complex nature of mitigating encampments is the local housing inventory. As you heard, currently we have several capital projects: the Home Key project that will have a total of 16 units completed, and we have rehabilitated the existing shelter, and we have the 4.6 acre Chappelle property where we have the goal of remodeling 2 homes. It is imperative we center dignity and equity in any strategy that serves the unsheltered population, and due to the complex nature of the issue, collaboration and coordination are critical to address this as a community. In the formation of this policy, the role of HHSA must align with our values and mandates or responsibilities. As a result, we will focus on our existing infrastructure to provide outreach and assessment, connection to services, and coordinate with community-based organizations. There is an existing homeless task force that should be leveraged as a collaborative platform to discuss encampment mitigation and continuation of these efforts. This is not a process that is a one and done. It is a complex social problem faced by every county in California that needs dynamic, innovative, and collaborative leadership from all areas of the county as established in the draft policy. With limited local resources, leveraging existing systems, and aligning with strategic planning efforts of HHSA around housing and homelessness will be key to the success of the implementation of an encampment policy. To effectively manage our role as outlined in the draft policy, we ask you to consider having key stakeholders, such as elected officials, county staff, school districts, city staff, and partners all actively participate in the homeless task force. This is an ongoing, complicated, county-wide issue where thoughtful planning and funding will be required to support staffing and resource needs for the county to effectively coordinate. Now I'll turn it over to behavioral health. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Amanda. That was excellent and summarizes a lot of the same components when we think about behavioral health's role. So I'm Dana Edgell, Behavioral Health Director, along with Nancy Avalera. And Nancy's really our subject matter expert in this area. Primarily, our role is really to do outreach, engage, work with folks so that they can understand what services are available, and try and build rapport and have some connection and build trust. And so we can help folks to understand who are experiencing homelessness, the resources that are available, the outpatient mental health and substance use disorder services that can be provided, crisis services, our Esperanza Center that's located in downtown Hollister, where we have a food pantry and other services, really trying to make our approach warm and welcoming to build connections. And then if we can build connections and develop relationships, we can help link folks are experiencing homelessness to additional supports and services. And then we also see our role to be involved during the process and to provide de-escalation and support when individuals who have mental health and substance use disorder issues, if there's potentially escalation happening during the kind of the removal of the encampments, we will work together with our staff and with our contract providers when it's appropriate to be involved in those de-escalation. Anything else that you'd like to share with the real hands-on experience that you've had?
The only thing I would add in addition is our department, our staff are active participants on the homeless task force, and we are committed to continuing to be an active participant on that task force. Our department is also working diligently on a grant that's called Behavioral Health Bridges to Housing, where we're working on housing our clients. This is a transitional housing grant. It's limited to transitional housing, but we are actively working to transitionally house some of our clients.
Are there any questions that you have for our department at this time?
We'll open that up after public comment.
Okay, sorry.
So we'll bring you back. Thank you.
Morning, board. So GIS's role in this is it's basically that survey 1 to 3 that they were talking about the pit count. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the same app, except we're going to configure it differently. It's a GIS app, so it'll store all the data, the locations of the encampments. We can store documents, pictures. We can store all kinds of stuff in there, and it's mobile. It's a mobile app. So that's basically what we'll be doing, as well as providing maps of the areas and stuff like that. So it's basically just keeping all the resources within one area that everybody can sign into, all departments, and add into it when they need to. And so that's next.
All right, good morning all. Steve Loop, Public Works Administrator. We'll be talking about the involvement of the Resource Management Agency in this endeavor. So the divisions that we envision being involved are Public Works, Code Enforcement, and Integrated Waste Management. Public Works, we have and will continue to provide some traffic control during situations in the public right-of-way and on private property. We'll talk about a little bit more in a second. Code enforcement, it should be noted that our code enforcement person is primarily focused on private property code enforcement issues, and the public right-of-way is kind of obviously per this policy, as was stated earlier, as a new policy. So our code enforcement will be performed by a person from Integrated Waste, which we'll talk about later in recommendations for the board's consideration. So the Integrated Waste will be involved and perhaps dedicate some of that staff member to this effort. And one couple things to note for example, the initial site assessment. So we envision, it was mentioned briefly, that a contract person who's versed and trained in hazmat materials and assessing sites would accompany one of the sheriff's team to the site with some other folks, perhaps behavioral health or HHSA folks, and perform that initial site assessment. But our staff, we have training in handling hazardous waste and somewhat identifying hazardous waste. But typically when we have a hazardous waste spill or a hazardous waste site, we call Public Works and RMA call contractors for those efforts. So, regarding code enforcement for private property code violations, that's ongoing, and Robin will talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And then for the actual cleanup remedial actions, again, our folks, we don't have in Public Works RMA, we don't have the equipment or the training for those remediation actions for sites. And that, as you can see from the photos, there's specialized equipment that our Public Works yard doesn't currently own or operate, and so we'll have to call in contractors for that effort. So a few of the challenges we want to identify is that trained staff and current staff capacity in Public Works to take on, specifically riverbed site assessments is, our capacity and training is extremely limited in that regard. So we do envision contracting out for both site assessments and cleanup. And we will provide support staff to accomplish county's timelines and efforts and just support the program in general. One thing to note, and I'll introduce her now, is our current code enforcement person has roughly a caseload of 100 cases plus or minus today, and she's our code enforcement division, which consists of one person. We typically get 3 to 4 to 5 new cases, per week sometimes. So there's quite a workload ongoing, existing today, and I'll let Ms. Robin Leland, our code enforcement person, talk more about some options and strategies.
Good morning. So we envisioned 3 distinct scenarios how we would approach this. Scenario 1 is code enforcement would provide a written notice of violation to abate the violations on the private properties and allow the owners time to remedy it or be heard by the board as to why they shouldn't be responsible for it. The expense would be assessed against the parcel for the cleanup, and a lien would be imposed on this property to reimburse the costs of cleaning it up. The pros to this is it's a lower cost to the county. We put all the burden on the property owners. The cons are there's additional staffing required to enforce, let's say, the 100 to 200 encampments or plus or minus in the creek bed or the riverbed. It would take more than just one person or one agency to address that. Also, wait times for abatement and reimbursement can vary. If we're relying completely on the property owners, that's going to vary on their ability to get it done, the cost of it, and then leaning that can also be time consuming. Scenario 2 is the county performs and funds the cleanup efforts on both public and private property with permission from the property owners. The pros to this is the county timeline for abatement. The work will get done to the county standards and in the time frame that we would like it to be done. The cons is the higher cost to the county. We have to front that cost to get it done. And there's more time and coordination required because we're not stopping that cyclical pattern. We're cleaning it up once and then it's just going to come back. Scenario 3, which is the scenario that we would recommend our team, is a 2-phased approach. It's the county provides the initial funding for the cleanup of the public and private property to restore the river to a pristine condition for a fresh start. You add lead staff that coordinates and delegates, then add sheriff's deputies to provide that routine patrol, and code enforcement can notify property owners of violations or begin administrative abatement processes. The pros to this is the county timeline. The work is done to our standards, the way we like it, and addresses ongoing cycle of cleanup with that ongoing patrol of the sheriff, code enforcement, and the joint agencies. The cons is the additional funding and the staffing required to effectively implement this long term. With that, I'll shift it.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. So for our office, we will commit to have personnel present on site during the cleanup efforts. Unless an encampment's abandoned, we'll still make an effort to be there, but we just put that in there as a group to make sure that if there's something that's clearly abandoned, that they can go and take action without the sheriff's office being there. And this is really for the safety of our own county staff. It's not for anything else other than that. Again, to ensure safety of staff and enforcement of violations of the laws may be necessary, subject to the sheriff's discretion. We'll provide criminal enforcement action as applicable. Hopefully it's not, but if it is needed, the ask of the county would be for a full-time deputy sheriff to be considered for ongoing efforts in the River Regional Park and other problem areas. We will take lead on final disposition of vehicles per the vehicle code and San Benito County code. That's one of the things that gets a little difficult. We've had some cooperation from private property owners to let us pull these cars out of the river and then put them on a private parcel and then have our staff go in there when applicable for the vehicle code. Vehicle code doesn't always apply in these situations because it's not a public road, but there are different abatement efforts that we can take as a sheriff's office to help get these cars out of there, and I believe that that's what we did with Robin's team before. So just for our office, to get away from the slide for a second, I think that what I've asked of our staff and what I continue to ask of our staff is to police aggressively, but also offer services on the back end. You can't be heavy-handed on one side or the other, and I think that in this state, we're seeing that good intentions sometimes lead to bad consequences, and by getting so laxed and having some poor case decisions, this problem has gotten completely out of control. And I think we're seeing the same thing, not to get too far off topic, but with Prop 36 to trying to correct some of the stuff with Prop 47, we got so lenient on structure and laws in this state that now we're trying to reel some of that back in. But it has to be balanced. And as the sheriff's office, we promise to have a balanced approach, work with our partners. Everybody here has a passion, and they're all here with a good heart. These meetings have been not difficult, but it's tough to find. When we start talking about the lead agency, we kicked that around quite a bit. This is a heavy lift for whoever's going to be the lead for this. Is going to be really difficult. And the main thing for me is that, and I know I feel like whenever I come in front of you, I'm asking for something, and that's not the intent of this presentation today, but I'm just trying to be realistic. And I meant to ask Renee before we came to this meeting to get the square miles of that, just of the San Benito River. That thing is so vast, and unless you go down there and you drive it, which I guess is not allowed, but we can, it is so vast that if we don't have a continued follow-up after we clean this up, it's just going to come back. And that was one of the main things that was stopping us from these. We've done these cleanups periodically over the years since I've been here. We've done these big cleanups. Sometimes we partner with private companies. Sometimes we use county staff. Selena's staff has been great with helping us get resources. We've used work alternative people. We've done these over and over again. The problem is we were barred from doing them on public property. So whatever we abated just moved onto the public parcels. That's why when the community starts seeing encampments under the 4th Street Bridge, under Union Bridge, that's because they've been pushed off of private property onto public parcels. And what this case decision does is now allows us to abate those too, where we were not allowed to prior. And with county council, they understand that if we would have tried to do that prior to this case decision, then our staff would have been liable for an 8th Amendment violation. They would have lost their qualified immunity. And that's something that I'm not going to ask my staff to do. But that's beside the point now, because we can take these actions and hold people accountable. So what I will commit to this board is that we will enforce criminal violations. We talked a lot about drug violations. Prop 36 might help with that a little bit, but if we come across someone that has cocaine, fentanyl, methamphetamine, it's an infraction or a misdemeanor at this point. They get a citation, so it doesn't that solely doesn't correct the problem. But by going down and enforcing trespassing down there, and then having a presence in that river and in our new regional trail system, having a presence there that as soon as these things start to pop up, we can stop it immediately and move these people on, and then we're not going to be back to this situation again. So again, I know we'll take questions at the end, but that's kind of, as your sheriff's office, that's where we're coming from, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so for today, our recommendations listed here. The unfunded needs that we're requesting is a full-time admin analyst or program manager to be the lead agency staff for this effort. As the Eric Taylor mentioned, the deputy sheriff at a C-step, approximately $130,000. What's already funded is our integrated waste code enforcement officer. This is unfilled at this time. but they would assist approximately 25% of their time each year, probably more of that in the initial stages of this cleanup effort. And then behavioral health has a case manager, housing navigator, and that's only funded through 2027. So please keep that in mind. The cost currently unfunded that will also need to be evaluated further is the storage. Unknown. There is the potential to contract that out, is my understanding. And then collection disposal cost, also unknown, but we have, I know, some agencies here with us today that have supported cleanup efforts in the riverbed, that has WOPR training. Certain certifications are very important. What we're seeing is other counties and cities using disaster debris management companies to do this kind of work. So we would be looking at various options to clean up the riverbed. Again, the recommendation, staff recommendation regarding lead agency, they would share the responsibilities and coordinate with the other departments. That would be the full-time admin analyst or program manager. And then the funding of the new personnel for overall management, including coordination with departments and homeless task force, and then the deputy sheriff. So we're available to answer any questions and as well as public comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's open it up to public comment and we'll bring it back to the board for questions.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card. On Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And in chambers, I believe I have Linda Lampe.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having this meeting today. And I'm sorry I was late. I didn't know it was happening. Somebody texted me and said, you need to get over there. So I did listen to some of the comments on the way over here. And I heard some questions that just shocked and appalled me. How do we not know how many people are at the river if you're trying to serve them? Not only do I know, I also know their names. I know their hopes, I know their dreams, I know their downfalls. I know what a lot of them ended up being there. I know what size shoe they wear. Why are the people that are in charge not knowing those answers? Why is it that when these meetings are held, that folks like me that are out there every day and see things are not included? That's exclusion, because probably the answer is we have a lot of the answers. And you know the biggest problem is it doesn't take a lot of funding. My husband and I, he doesn't like me talking about this, but my husband and I fund this out of his Social Security, my Social Security, and the commissions he makes on real estate. And a few people that support us and the food that we get from Martha's Kitchen and the grocery stores. Why do we not know? And when you give these notices that people have to go, some of them are so traumatized they can't move. They become immobilized. We go out and we try to help them, and you're chasing them away. And you know what? The cleanup. Years ago, my husband and I were going down to the river and all these places with our garden trailer. Caltrans was giving us garbage bags, and we appointed homeless people as ambassadors, as team captains to clean up. We had our own, and all we asked the county for was to pay for the John Smith landfill, and they didn't deem that in the budget. I'm here to tell you that as a community, we could change this. We could be the shining city on the hill instead of, it's heartless what you all have done. You have made our job more difficult. You've scattered our flock. We can't go out and serve people. We've helped 289 people off the streets permanently. And I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones that I know about. And how did we do that? One by one. And our little thrift store that's going to be closing because I'm going back out in the streets, but it's worth saving. And you know why? Because I tell people, when you know your real worth, there will be no stopping you. That's what we try to do. I tell people I can see right through you, and I see the good in you. And when you start building on that and helping people to know who they are and claim who they are, then we can change this problem for good. And I challenge you, let's do it, San Benito County.
Thank you for your comment.
Next in chambers, Elia Salinas.
Thank you. Good morning. When I got here, I wondered where Linda Lampy was. She got here a little bit late because she didn't know this was happening. That woman is the most experienced and has the most positive outcome of what happens with the homeless when she helps them. You literally are spending millions and millions of dollars on departments that can't even do what she does. Behavioral health is out here saying earlier, oh, we're here to help you, we're gonna be there, we're gonna support you. Behavioral health can't even help a person who lives in a home and is having problems. They have a whole list. Y'all know my opinion of how behavioral health is literally failing this county. Everything is contracted out. Everything's contracted out. How are these people, how are they going out there and helping? In January of 2018, Mark Hirsch, who no longer lives in San Benito County, but he lived along the San Benito County River, he started the Friends of the San Benito River. And we would go out there. Mark Medina and Jim Gillio were supervisors at the time. RJR would give us one of those trash bins, dumpsters, and we would go out there, a group of volunteers, and go out there and clean twice a year. And the only place we couldn't clean was private property, because the private property people didn't want us trespassing when we were there to help them. We had 2 individuals that would go out there first before the rest of the volunteers, and they were the ones who were out there looking for hypodermic needles or anything that was sharp. So when the rest of us came in, we weren't going to be in any danger. Jim Gillio provided the equipment, the gloves, the bags, and we threw them into the dumpsters. All this for free. If you have the plan you're going to go out and clean them, you're going to get rid of all the homeless. What is your plan? Where are they going to go? Where are they going to go? You don't even know that. You don't care. Some of you don't even care as long as you made a promise that I'm going to get rid of them and I want them out there. Well, you know what? The sheriff department is willing to help, and the deputies aren't custodians. They're not going to go out there and continue to pick up the trash after it's been cleaned up. They're going to go and they're going to maybe patrol to see if there's another homeless person out there, but that's not their job to pick up trash. Whose job is it? Whose job is it to clean? We had volunteers out there, and we had board supervisors support. What are you doing individually? You're here complaining and you want this done, but you as an individual person, what are you doing personally?
Thank you for your comment.
I have no further public comment.
Okay, bringing it back to the board. Who would like to start? Supervisor Kosmicki?
Sure, I'll start. Yeah, first off, I just overall appreciative of the cooperation from everyone. I know this is a complicated challenge, a lot of layers involved. It's not going to be a perfect process. It's going to be a lot of, learning as we go, but I appreciate just the willingness to move on this as soon as possible, because I can assure you that as somebody who has literally talked to thousands of residents, and particularly on the west side of Hollister that deals more with the riverbed probably than any area, that the vast majority of our residents want this addressed and they want it to be a priority. The private property abatement issue, I just wanted, so I assume this is we're mostly speaking of the riverbed, because the part of the riverbed is public, part of it is private. But the way I see it just broadly is that you basically have people living on private property without consent of the owner, and Robin's shaking her head. And so the simple question I have is, because we are now past, well, actually it wouldn't have really necessarily applied to the district court rulings, because this is private property. So isn't that simply just, I don't know if somebody can answer this, isn't that simply just trespassing? And why can't we have them removed? And if they're not going to move, have them arrested. If somebody's sleeping in my front yard, I expect them to be removed or arrested.
Thank you for the easy question.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. If somebody calls and says someone's trespassing on my property, we can go out there, because they're calling and ask us to go out there. I think what we were talking about with county council is us proactively going on to people. So a lot of these parcels down there are absentee owners. And so I would think, logically, that they would love for the county to come and clean up their mess and pay for it. And I think one thing for us is that our concern is that we're gonna have staff down there that they don't know what line they're crossing. They don't know what parcel they're on. When you're down there, it's vast, and I don't want, us to put ourselves into any liability with misuse of funds or whatever because we're over the wrong line. But to try to succinctly answer your question, if somebody asks us to go enforce trespass on their parcel, we're good. We can go and do that, remove that person. One thing that we're realizing now is that a new, I think it was an assembly bill came down, that we used to just be able to kind of like get consent from an owner on an annual basis by just having them fill out this form that we just made up a form in our office and they signed it and we kept it. Those forms now have to be notarized. And I read the code is it only needs to be notarized if it's being submitted electronically. There's a difference of opinion there. One thing that we were asking that Renee with that ArcGIS survey 123 is that if we can make that form available, that people can just download it off of our website, get it notarized and upload it into ArcGIS, then all these owners can just give us 12-month authority to go on their property. And that's what I think is the true answer. Because without that consent to go on, we cannot enforce a misdemeanor that we're not the victim of and it's not being committed in our presence. And so we can't go on to private property and then create the misdemeanor without the property owner saying, this is my property, I want them to go, and they're refusing to leave, then we can make an arrest. And we will.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I think that should be a priority of this whole thing, and that's where GIS comes in, and to make sure that that's on the front line of what we're really trying to do here, because just logically, if the homeless, they're a very savvy community, and if they know that the county is saying you're not going to sleep in the riverbed here, they know very well, there's other areas where they may be able to go, and I think we should be reaching out to those property owners and getting that process started as far as, having the communication with the property owners, because they might be confused. They might not understand that, that they can have these folks removed from their properties. And I think they should have the right to understand that and have them removed if there are people, and we know there are people that are, that have these encampments on private properties. So I would appreciate that to be a priority, and thank you, Sheriff, for that. The lead agency part, I would just, and I'm willing to, discuss this and be open to this, but I think I would recommend integrated waste being the lead agency. Sorry, Selena, with strong support from HHS, the Behavioral Health, Sheriff's Office, Public Works, Code Enforcement, and then more on the periphery, other partners such as nonprofits who are willing to step in and help. And again, I'm open to that conversation. I'm not trying to be bullish here. It's just that came up, and that's my first thought. Funding wise, I would support use of one-time funds to get this process moving. I think a lot of this is going to be the initial phases of this to really we're trying to compel people to get help, to get the help that they need, and to send a message, particularly that we're not going to allow encampments in the riverbed, because the riverbed has been, to me, the core of the problem here, and there are a lot of other risks that come with the riverbed that I'll get into in a moment. Support the funding for cleanup and storage. I'd like to get us moving as soon as possible on that, and I know we've discussed, I believe at the finance committee level, if we can shift some funding over from ARPA, and I believe there may be some opportunities there, that we do that. In the meantime, I would personally recommend that we go into the contingency fund and allocate some funds out of the contingency fund so that we can get started as soon as possible, and then have those ongoing discussions about whether we can shift back, find a way to shift back some of the ARPA funding that may be available, or if the ARPA funding is available and we know it's available, then to start using the ARPA funding now, because I believe this should be a top priority with those funds. I know there are other endeavors that we want to get to, but this should be a top priority, and we need money to get moving on this, because we know the cleanup and the storage in particular are going to cost money. As far as staffing goes, I'm willing to have that conversation. I do think we should, the initial part of this, because staffing is permanent, is to kind of see how this goes at the beginning, and to explore the staffing needs as we go. I'm willing to have that conversation whenever it's necessary, but I don't necessarily, because our budget is strapped as it is, I don't know to what level of staffing we need. Maybe we need more than that. I don't know. So I think that's something that we need to assess as we go. I'm willing to have that conversation though about staffing, because this does need to be a priority, and this board has made it a priority. So And I do understand that you need people to get these things done. I certainly get that. And I don't want the sheriff's office or public works or integrated waste, I don't want people feeling like they can't do anything else, obviously. So I just think that's something that we need to assess, but I'm willing to have that conversation with the board and staff just on an ongoing basis, because it would take a budget adjustment, obviously. Go ahead, Sheriff.
Sorry. I just want to qualify something. So the reason that I would ask for a dedicated staff member is because it is so difficult to get down in there, and then once you're in there, it's difficult to get out. So by using people that are already on patrol, like our Dodge Chargers aren't going to make it down there, especially in the winter. So I know it's always like, well, I need another person, That's not truly not what I'm trying to say. But going forward, pulling from what I already have is going to be a challenge. We have other requests coming in, funded requests for school resource officers and stuff like that I'm not able to fill right now. But we have, this board was gracious enough to accept asset forfeiture Jeep. That's ideal for a person to go down there. We have a side-by-side, we have quads. But once somebody's down there, that's their world for that shift. Because in and out, it's just not going to work. So that's why I would need a dedicated person. And I appreciate, maybe we need more than that, but I just think for four days a week is a start. 10 hours a day, 4 days a week is a good start. But so that just so the public and the boards understand where I'm coming from, this person needs to live down there and work down there and just be there because it's so vast.
I got you. And you envision this being, there would be a need for this going forward in perpetuity, considering the environment that we are facing.
Yes, and not to get too far off topic, but I did have a nice conversation with Andy Chacarone out front, and I told him that I would agree with this statement. As Santa Cruz County, Santa Clara County, Monterey County, as these other counties that have more resources are clamping down as hard as they are, that population's coming here. And so I do foresee a rural county like ours with limited resources, we're right for the picking if we don't stay on top of it. That's my concern. My concern is that we're going to go through all this, spend all this money, clean it up, and then not have a presence there again for a while. And what I'd said in the meeting is once people see the encampments off of the bridges, that means that it's a pretty full house down there because by design, this population doesn't want to be located. They want to, so once it pushes out to those areas, we know that between the bridges, it's pretty full.
Yeah.
With like underground structures, vehicles, tires, it's a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's just, I'm willing to listen to other folks and get feedback and all that. Because I want this to get done, obviously. I think this needs to be, we've been talking about this and I'll get a little more into it since I joined the board. I mean, this has to get done. So I appreciate that enlightenment. Just want to emphasize though, before I get in, I'll try to be as brief as possible, that we do need to be aggressive with services here. And so this is a collaborative effort. This is going to be something that needs to have strong leadership. There was talk of the homeless task force and a lead agency, but there are the layers, and to me, mental health in particular, behavioral health is going to really be as important, if not more important than any other element of this, because we have to really emphasize being aggressive with providing those services and finding a way to finally get a lot of these people to accept those services and to compel them to get the help they need. And I am a firm believer that the approach that's been taken in the state of California and locally is not working. As one of the speakers said, we were pouring money into this and the numbers just keep going up. The problem just keeps getting worse. So we have to change the approach at some point. And I do believe that the free-for-all approach doesn't work. The idea that taking these district court rulings and saying, well, they can pretty much live where they want, do what they want, they can commit certain crimes if they want, and we've talked about this in the past, and our hands are tied on that. Well, our hands aren't tied anymore. I do believe the most compassionate thing we can do is to send a message to this community that we are here to help. We want you to get help. We are going to compel you. We are going to do what we can to get you the help. So I believe mental health needs to be a key part of it. Also emphasize we need to keep moving forward on providing more housing, more affordable housing. Our policies, frankly, I'm going to point this out, are flawed. Every time the affordable housing policy comes back to the Board of Supervisors or to the City Council, it keeps they're keeping these arguments in favor of, well, the developers, they're not gonna build if we only do 15%, or we need to give these breaks within the 15%. We can't do low-income housing because, this and that. So if we really truly are serious about providing more housing, then we have to address it at the policy level and be serious about it. And I will say that when that comes back, and I'm hopeful that the affordable housing policy comes back very soon, if not before 2025, at the outset of 2025, that we take a serious look at really addressing affordable housing policies so that we are truly providing the housing that's needed. And I'm not talking about supply and demand in single family housing, because there is, I'm not going to go into it, but building more $800,000 houses is not going to provide opportunities for people that are currently on the streets to have housing. That's just absurd. So we do need to provide very low and low income housing. 15% is not enough within these developments. And the goal here on the sheriff note, it's not to criminalize. Everyone says you're trying to criminalize homelessness. No, we're not. We're enforcing the law. And if there are crimes being committed, if people are committing crimes in public, then they need to be addressed, basically. And I've stated this before, when I joined the board in April of 2021, and I knew about it already, as most people in this community know about it, there was another one of these fires that crop up, and they're going to keep happening. They happen pretty continuously in the riverbed. These are real dangers to our community. There are neighborhoods that are nearby these areas where these fires are happening. There are shootings that are happening in the riverbed. There are all these other violent crimes that are going on. There's rampant drug use and open drinking and all this stuff that's going on in a riverbed, which, by the way, so that's just this public safety part of it. We often somehow forget that the riverbed is a sensitive habitat. It's one of the most sensitive habitats that we have. So where are the environmentalists when, and I know one of them's in the back here, but where are the environmentalists who you can't have it both ways, saying we've got to let homeless people live where they want, do what they want, but and then we want to keep the environment clean. Well, the riverbed is kind of important when it comes to the habitat of our community. So those are the two biggest things for me. Public safety in the riverbed habitat, and to me, a lot of this comes back to the riverbed, and that's where it started. I wanted the riverbed cleaned up when one of these major fires happened in the spring of 2021, and as the sheriff knows, there were roadblock after roadblock after roadblock after roadblock that came up, and a lot of it came back to these district court rulings, which are now overturned, so there is no argument against cleaning up the riverbed. That is my primary priority with this initiative, getting the riverbed clean, minimizing public safety issues, and minimizing environmental damage caused by these encampments in the riverbed. So those legal roadblocks are no longer there. Again, the constituents have been very clear they want this done, and I've been very consistent about it. And as far as, I'll try to get through most of these here in a minute. Let's see here. So the riverbed and other sensitive areas. I'll also note that the governor of our state has made it very clear that he wants these taken care of. So the state of California has been very clear that these encampments need to be a priority. This isn't a radical move that we're taking here. We're being told by the governor to do it, so we should be doing it. And then other than that, sorry, I don't want to be repetitive here. That would be repetitive. Again, this is not going to be perfect, but I want this to get moving as soon as possible, because you start delaying things, and we've seen it before. There are going to be folks in the community that intentionally try to delay this. We need to get moving on this. We need to compel these residents to get moving. For me, I'd like us to really make this a priority and have the county team and the partners involved to make this a priority and to get moving as soon as possible. I don't know what that means. I would like to hopefully get an answer from staff as to what realistically would be a timeline for this, because for me, we approved this and we talked about getting moving on this 30 days after the ordinance went into effect, which would have been late September, and we're heading into late October now. So I would like to see this happen basically now. We're at the end of the wildfire season. The winter's around the corner. We've had winters not too far past that where the riverbed has been flowing, and that is a danger to these communities, along with the wildfire season, which is 12 months of the year now. So lastly, I will say, I appreciate the cooperation from staff. I appreciate the board making this a priority. The city of Hollister needs to step up. The city of Hollister needs to step up. The private property owners need to step up. We discussed this at intergovernmental, and it became very clear there was reluctance from the city of Hollister to move forward with a similar mechanism to clean up encampments. And that will be a problem for our overall community if the city of Hollister doesn't step up and allow law enforcement and allow others to enforce the law. Mayor Casey and Councilmember Rick Perez have basically shown very clear reluctance to cleaning up encampments. And I'm just concerned that they will simply move their encampments into the city side of the riverbed or other areas of the city when we move forward. Lastly, I just want to at some point get clarity on timing and when we can get this going. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Supervisor Gonzalez?
Yes, while I agree with Supervisor Kosmicki that we do need to change the approach, I don't think bashing the city or city council members is the approach that we need to take. I listened to the presentation, and granted, it's going to take all of us to solve this problem. We need the compassion and dignity that came from Linda Lampe. We need to make it more of a community effort. While I agree on the staffing that we're going to need to definitely give the sheriff his FTE that he's going to require to get this job done, I'm not so sure if we've identified the proper agency to be the lead agency. And so I would like to hear from staff, who's willing to step up and do the job. Well, no disrespect to Selena, but I don't think that you are the appropriate department in that we need somebody that has more experience with social service aspect, the humanity, the social services, the programs that are out there. So I wouldn't want to put your department in charge of that. Granted, you do a good job of trying to collect all of the refuse that's around, the community and cleaning up the sites and so forth, but I just don't think that your department is the one to take the lead. I don't know who is, but I would like to know who would be willing to step up. Would it be Tracy? Would it be Dana? Would one of you be willing to take the lead agency role? Because I think we need to hear from you. Do you not want it? Do you not think that your department could handle it? Do you think it's an overreach for us? I mean, that's the real question. Who is going to be the lead agency? Because it's a big ask. It's a significant ask. We also are going to have to think about funding and budgeting in terms of how we're going to fund these needs. I like the cooperation with the sheriff department and doing that dual approach in terms of the county coming in and dealing with both the private and the public property at the same time, and then finding some way that the county can get reimbursed for its costs from the property owners. And if the property owners aren't interested in sign that waiver, that permission to enter, we need to find some of this. For me, there's just too many uncertainties. There's not enough answers right now. So, though I know we need to do something regarding the homeless in the rivers, I don't know if what we're doing so far is the route to go. As I said, funding's an issue for me. Who's going to be the lead agency? How we're going to go about it? But it needs to be done with dignity, compassion, and equity. That needs to be the biggest concern moving forward. It's a problem, yes. The rainy seasons are coming, yes. And we did see an inundation of rain and water flowing through the river last year, which hadn't been an issue. The river's been dry for so long, it hadn't been so much an issue. But now we're looking at health and safety and possible loss of lives if we get the amount of rain that we got last year. So we do need to do something. We do need to change the approach. I just don't know that we as a board have identified all of the issues, specifically the lead agency, in moving forward with this. And so I have some serious concerns. I agree we do need to make sure the city is working with us because, again, city, county, we have to work together, but bashing each other is not the route to go. It's just kind of defeating the purpose of any kind of teamwork effort and collaboration. So I have more questions than I have answers, sorry.
Which one would you like to go first? Okay, Supervisor Sotelo.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for this presentation. I feel like since I took office, this is the first time I feel like we've brought all of our county departments together, and we're dealing with this problem in such a comprehensive way. And so hats off to all of you for being so collaborative. And I hope that this is like a step that we can start conquering all kinds of issues within the county, because I really believe we can get so much more done when we're working together rather than operating in silos. And that goes for our county, that goes for our community, kind of everything. So thank you, staff, so much for all of your hard work on this. The presentation, I was incredibly impressed Linda Lampy, and to your group, thank you so much for everything you've done. And I think just the approach that you bring in bringing so much kind of humanity to it and the dignity and seeing through people. And I hope that we can use your approach as kind of our model for moving forward. We've got to address this issue as a community, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it with heart. And so I hope that maybe you'll be part of the team as we do this. One of the things that was missing a little bit for me today was the community-based organizations. And so I think that us being county government, there are some things that we do really well, but I think we become even stronger when we partner with our community-based organizations and our nonprofits. There are some things that they can do, and they can do better than we can. And so I really welcome, I think we're off to a great start, but I really welcome even more collaboration with our community-based organizations. You know, I think dealing with this in the most humane and dignified manner is going to be incredibly important as we move forward. This is a public safety issue, though, and I really, as a mom, it's so incredibly important to me that our community is safe and that there is access for everyone and that we're able to help, right? And so we want to keep our community safe. We want to get people the services that they need. And so some of the suggestions that I heard today, I really, really appreciated. One was the homeless task force and really being more strategic about who's sitting on there and kind of that more comprehensive. I have attended, I think I was on the homeless task force last year, and I think getting very strategic about who's sitting on there, their active participants, is going to be so incredibly important. Also, behavioral health, your approach in kind of saying you're committed to responding as we're dealing with some of these, to deal with the de-escalation, and the particular training that you have, I think is phenomenal, so thank you. I believe with the Axon software and items that we purchased, there also was training that went along with that as well. Am I correct in that? The sheriff is shaking his head, yes. And some of that dealt with, so our officers should have an even greater understanding, hopefully today, than they did maybe last year, the year before, in dealing with people with schizophrenia or different mental health issues or substance abuse, but working on de-escalating some of those situations as well. Is that fair to say? Not to put you on the spot?
No, yeah, you're absolutely correct. So we do have that training that the staff goes through, and actually there's state law now with de-escalation as if you fail to de-escalate situations, you could be decertified as a police officer. So it is something that we've taken very seriously and that we do. And then the training through Axon, the sensitivity training that we go through, which is VR training, it's pretty significant.
Thank you. And I think just kind of that approach is going to help tremendously. We maybe had bad experiences before, but I guess I'm really looking forward and thinking this could be a really positive thing for many. I am curious, though, and I don't know if anybody can answer this, based on our point in time count and now kind of what we're hearing, and if people are cleared out, how do we potentially deal with having several hundred people that all of a sudden now we need to house? Where are they going to go? What are we going to do as a community to make sure that they're not just relocating somewhere else, right? That they're not just relocating on city property, like, well, we've cleaned them out of the county property, now they're going to city, who cares? I mean, it's about truly trying to get these people help, trying to get them housed. And so I'm just curious, has there been any work on that front at all as far as where people will go once they've been removed? I don't think we have, are we at 40 beds at the shelter or less than, a little more than that? 44? 44. So 44 beds at the shelter. We've got 16 units coming, and then Chapel Road, we said there was 2 that possibly are in the works. That's far below possibly what's going to be needed. And I think that is an issue that we need to be ready and willing to deal with. I don't want it to be like, not our problem, it is our problem, and how do we help? I'm just curious also, have we discussed any of the options? Now I'm going scenario 1, 2, 3. Have we discussed any of these options with any of the private property owners that have property in that area? And was there any feedback from them at all? I mean, do they know this discussion's happening?
No, we haven't had that conversation, and personally, I think we should, not just slap them in the face with, here's all this is your issue, we've left it for 10 years and now.
Yeah.
But it's whatever the group decides, but give them fair opportunity to clear it up themselves and then say, okay, the county's coming in and we're gonna get it to this standard.
Thank you. I really would like to see us work with the private property owners. I do support option 3. I think that makes most sense. I also am very supportive of a 6-month evaluation period. For the lead agency, I would be it makes natural sense to me that it's Health and Human Services. It just seems like they can start to help connect the dots, and everybody has such an important role in all of this. It's hard to identify just one lead agency, but I do think that it kind of makes sense to me in my mind. I don't know, Tracy, if you want to speak to that at all. I don't want anybody feeling like we're throwing anybody under the bus. Like, we are all a team, and so
Sure.
Go ahead.
So we've talked about this a lot. We've had several meetings as a working group, and thrown around lots of different ideas. What we believe, I believe collectively, is that we need somebody from administration to represent the county as a whole, because we're all departments that make up the county. I believe that in the slide there was a request for an administrative staff analyst or something out of admin. We really feel like we need somebody to help us collectively. Happy to help as Health and Human Services. We are always happy to help and be an excellent partner. Everybody is here. I mean, we've spent a ton of time working on this collectively. We've had numerous meetings, but it's something that, as we know, it's not going to go away, so we have to continue to be persistent. As far as, housing folks, I think it's important to understand that we're not just going to go sweep the river and move everybody at one time. As Linda stated, one life at a time, right? And our approach is to give people an opportunity to move themselves, right? Folks sometimes are creative and can find their own opportunities. We have opportunities that we're willing to explore. We have a ton of different housing programs, and that's why, as an agency, we chose to move them all into one department, so that all my social workers and all my housing navigators are all talking about the clients collectively to figure out where is the best fit for them in what program. We have a ton of housing programs and funding, but you have to meet certain criteria, right? And so, it's not going to happen overnight. The river is not going to get cleaned up overnight. It's going to take time, and we care about people before we care about cleanup. Sorry, just saying. That is our focus as a Health and Human Services agency. People that work with me and for me have a passion to help and help and assist people. So, yes, we have limited space in our housing options, but we also have a ton of connections with different partners. And so we have hotel vouchers. Behavioral Health has hotel vouchers. There's a lot of things that you guys don't need to know and trust us to know. And so our ask, I think collectively as a work group, is that somebody's assigned out of administration to be, if we have to call it a lead entity, they're the lead, and then we all partner together. And the working group will be the Homeless Task Force. And that is where we will talk about abatements and clients and different situations. So.
Thank you. I appreciate you clarifying. I did see the admin kind of analyst, but I was like, oh, I guess that's just for whatever lead agency we're going to. So I'm going to now look at admin. Is admin open and willing to take this on? I mean, I would be supportive of that, but I want to make sure that you all are supportive of that as well.
So, yeah, last week they had a group meeting, so they brought me in, and we talked about it as a group coming in at the end stage here. But I did some also checking around with other agencies and stuff, and some of them have them in admin as the lead, as an initial startup, right? So to kind of kick this project off, whether it stays in admin forever is, could be dealt with later on, but I think to get this kind of collaboratively started, I know that there was, questions, because it's like, everybody's got a piece of this puzzle, right? So who's gonna lead this?
Right.
And to kind of make sense a little bit, because you've got contracts with vendors, you've got different things that could be going on, so it does make sense. I will say the challenges for admin right now is that with that have to be recruitment. I don't have anybody available to do that. Also just space here in admin. I have, in this room next door, I have 18 bodies in just this room. It's about the size of this room. So I don't have any space, but I think as a lead, yes, we can, probably could work with human services, or somebody's got a broom closet somewhere at least. So, but I think that, I'm kidding, but I think that, we can make that work.
Okay.
We have plenty of space.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate everybody, again, just kind of your willingness to work together and tackle this issue. So I'm supportive of admin being the lead agency, thank you, Tracy, for what you said about really caring about the people before kind of this cleanup, because I think that is really kind of collectively all of our sentiment, or at least I hope it is. Let's see, what else? I am supportive of the funding for the initial cleanup, but I'm also supportive of the ongoing funding and implementing the new positions. I think if we're serious about this, we've got to be serious about it from the get. And I think if we're going to kind of like, oh, we'll do this initial funding, but we're not going to do ongoing, I think it's going to be 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. And so I would really like to see us be very committed to this issue and kind of this continuum of care and the cleanup and the patrol. And I think with the regional park coming, I really believe if we're not going to face it today, we're going to be facing it then. So why not let's do this, and let's do this right. We have an opportunity to do this right. Let's be a model county for how this is handled in dealing with things. And so I am definitely supportive of that. And I encourage that we all work kind of together for storage issues and things of that. I would encourage us to lean on county council for extra help, making sure that we're all staying legal and that we're addressing any of the issues. So I think those are my comments, but thank you.
I do have one additional comment really quick. When it comes to the funding part of that would still have to be really kind of hashed out, looked at. I know that we may be able to collaboratively, with some input from some of the behavioral health or health and human services to kind of combine that funding a little bit with potential general fund or out of ARPA. So I just want to make sure that that still is in discussion and that we can try to be creative with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there are opportunities for us to be kind of creative, but I'm just, as a one supervisor sitting here, I am supportive of us being as creative as we can. But I think that if we're going to do this, we need to do this right. So thank you.
Supervisor Zanger.
Yeah, thank you. All right, really glad that we're moving forward with this. I don't really feel the need to rehash the whole homelessness approach argument. I think it's pretty inarguable that the hands-off approach hasn't been effective and everything's gotten worse over the last couple of years. So that being said, I will say that I was going to clarify, when did we do our final reading on this where we had 30 days? Was that, do we know that date?
Microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been about 6 weeks. The ordinance went into effect at the end of September.
Okay.
But the only reason it couldn't move that quickly, we're actually moving pretty quick with the number of departments that are involved.
Okay, great, yeah. Well, that's good, yeah. I also just want to make sure we have that urgency. We want to make sure that we don't slow down too much, and we don't want to deal with more hiccups, so we want to keep moving on this. As far as the lead agency, I don't think it really matters too much who we want to call the lead, because everyone's going to be so involved. I'm fine with admin. I mean, department heads can draw straws if they want. It doesn't really matter so much. I have a question for the sheriff.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so a couple questions. I appreciate you, first of all, saying that, you guys would commit to enforcing the law basically down there and everything. Really appreciate that. You made a comment earlier about the drug issues and how they're just like an infraction or a misdemeanor. I just want to be clear, does that mean, were you saying that you will be ignoring the drug issues then, or since it's only a misdemeanor, what was just to be clear on that?
No, not ignoring it at all. Just it's not a solution to getting people out of the river because they're going to get a citation, and then, yeah, potentially that citation turns into a warrant. The way that the courts are here, it's different than the county I came from. If the warrant's less than $6,000, it's cited again, even if they fail to appear. It's a constant frustration for us. We have people that have warrants here, even. Let me put it this way. I don't want to go off on a tangent about my frustrations with the criminal justice system, but if we have somebody in our county, we're coming across people in our county that have out-of-county warrants. In my opinion, it would be nice to take those people into custody, return them to the county where they're wanted, and that just is not happening in the state of California. We're just giving them another citation on a San Benito County Sheriff citation, citing them out to a Tulare County Court, and they just stay here. So that's my only thing, Supervisors. It's just not a. I think for a lot of the community, they think, well, just go down, and if someone has drugs, then they go to jail, and that just doesn't happen in the state of California currently. Maybe it's going to change in this election, but currently that's just not an option.
Got it. Okay, so I did have a question. So I know the city of Hollister, I listened to the intergovernmental meeting, and there is reluctance for them to adopt a similar ordinance. But I was going to ask you, have you spoken to Chief Reynoso about this at all? Do they have any sort of plans to deal with their property in the river? Do you know?
I've brought it up a few times. I don't think that we've gotten anywhere with it, and that's absolutely my concern, is that, except what Supervisor Kosmicki said, and this goes back to what we were worried about before with public lands, is that there are a number of parcels in this river that are jurisdiction of the city of Hollister. I will tell you, we try not to step on each other's toes, but as the sheriff of the county, I have authority to police those areas. I believe I have a responsibility to police those areas, to be honest with you, if they're not being policed. And so I think that there may be, and I, look at council as well, but I think that we have options there, but it's just like, it gets right back to the thing about, for us to go through, and we talked about this as a group. This problem's been here for a while. It's been brought up. It's been not addressed for a myriad of reasons. But I believe since I've been here since 2014, we've had pretty great cooperation with the landowners in the river. On another side of it, I've had two completely differing opinions about the San Benito River. We talk about environmental issues and the high water line, and that we can go in. It's part of the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary. This flows into the Pajaro River watershed. It's all interconnected. Herman could probably back me up on that. So I think that we have an obligation environmentally to clean up the river. We used to have a district meeting in this county for environmental crimes, and someone from the state DA's association ran that district meeting. And in one meeting, it came up that they did some research, and for some reason, their opinion is that the San Benito River is different based on old mining rights to that river. And the reason why that river is so vast and so wide is decades and decades and decades of aggressive mining. So I honestly, as I stand here today, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if we have authority to go under the high water line, which is in a normal river. We can do whatever the heck we want down there because it's an environmental issue and it's public health. And that makes sense to people. And then we get to these nuances here, shocking that San Benito County is an outlier. But we get to these other nuances about this private property lines going into the river bottom, which is not normal. So if we don't have cooperation, if the city doesn't want to, and let me go back, I do think the city has actually done a good job to this point of cleaning up the parcels in the river. They've done, through their code enforcement, multiple operations. When we weren't doing them, they were doing them. But you get around South Street in that area, Apricot, down below there, that's a heavy concentration of encampments, and there's city parcels down there. So I think we all need to be on the same page if this is going to be successful, but I don't think it bars us from taking enforcement action as the sheriff, to be honest with you.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. And I do hope the city does step up and really work on this with us and adopt something similar so that we don't have these issues that we're talking about. So I just want to be clear. The proposed deputy sheriff, you said he'd be down there 4 days a week, 10 hours a day. Do you mean like forever? Like that's his job now?
Yes.
Like that's it. He put an office down there basically, and he would just live there for the next 20 years?
Well, if I could put an office down there, it'd be better. But we were looking at for a while about having. I know this maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but the county was looking at, my understanding, some property down near the river for the regional park to look, to house maintenance and stuff like that. And I actually thought that was gonna be great, because I was gonna want an office down there for a deputy sheriff to work out of that building, and that didn't happen. But let me tell you, I wasn't part of the meetings with the Santa Cruz County team like some of our other people were. Other communities are creating teams, full-time teams, 7 days a week, with multiple cops, multiple HHSA people, multiple behavioral health, that are just dedicated to this. And then we get back to San Benito County, and we're trying to just start with one, not even a team, just one person to be down there 25% of the time to help these things come back. And I know, like, for us, that's a huge ask. It's a huge ask for this county, especially with what's going on and the raises that this board has given, and with everything else that we're facing. It's a big time ask, but I'm just trying to be realistic that, for instance, I got a call last night from our CAO, who got a call from somebody else, that there was a fire up at the Four Corners. And nobody was responding for traffic control because CHP wasn't available, and so we had 2 people working. So the only 2 guys we had were doing traffic control at a fire last night, and so today you saw 3 people come in. I have a sergeant, a training officer, and a trainee that came down here, and we released them because they got calls. But it's just not realistic to think that if this cleanup was already done, like today, no deputies are going to the river, or tomorrow, or tonight, or at all, unless they get called down there, because we just have 2 or 3 people working for the entire county, and once they're down there, it's hell to get out. We've had them get stuck, and we have to go get them pulled out, which takes more resources. And so I'm just trying to, if I don't get a deputy sheriff position, that doesn't mean we're not going to go do this. I'm just being honest, realistic, that ongoing policing down there, it's not realistic to think it's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. My only concern would be, it just seems like such a limited use of the broad skill set of a deputy.
It is a huge area. It is huge down there.
No, I understand the space. I'm saying the skill set of, he's telling homeless people they can't camp here. That'd be his whole job.
If you want to think that this person would only be in the San Benito River, that's not the intent of this. They would.
That's what I was trying to ask.
Sorry. As the regional park expands, I think that we need a presence in our regional parks, right? It doesn't matter if it's the park that's down on the new Southside development, or the new regional park, or other parks in our community that they can get to. I'm going off of a model that we use at Watsonville Police Department. We had a guy that was called Parks and Trails. He had a dual sport in the city of Watsonville, and he patrolled city parks on the city walkway system that went through all the sloughs. And it was a full-time job, and it wasn't even enough just to have one. We also had a downtown walking beat guy. That's all he did, is walk up and down Main Street. I think that San Juan Bautista needs something like that. So we do have dedicated specialized assignments in policing that make sense. And so I'm not just saying they can only be confined to the San Benito River. Yes, they need to have a presence down there, but then I've also talked with Selena about they can go up to the San Juan Canyon and deal with dumping issues up there. They can go down to the Pinoch Valley when we have dumping issues down there. It can be more of there's more to the job than just that. But then I just know that if I'm bringing somebody in and they're tasked with this, they're not at risk of getting called to the domestic violence call in Aromas. That if I have someone stuck down in the river or on some regional park trail, that they can't get to that call. That's my concern. Or they're way out in Little Pinoch, doing a cleanup, and then they get called back up to Ridgemark and they can't make it. Right. That's my concern.
Got it. Right. Understood. Okay. Well, and I don't know if this is, I'll just say, and I don't know if this would be feasible or not, but I think one thing we should do just going forward in general is maybe exploring the courthouse guys. That I know the 3 or 4 guys that are working the metal detector in there in the courthouse. I don't know if that's the best use of their time or their skills.
It's a violation of the MOU. They can't do it. That's a county thing, but I can't use those extra help deputies for patrol.
Okay, well, we'll have to discuss some other time, because I heard otherwise from admin in the past about how we could maybe make that work in the future.
I would have HR look at the MOU with the Deputy Sheriff's Association.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. And I get criticized often for, you say you don't have any people, but you have 5 guys standing there. There's a retired annuitants that I can't use for other stuff. Now, we do have a first right of refusal, so if I put an overtime sign up for the river and no deputies sign up for it, I could use them, but I can't compel them to do it because they're retired annuitants. They're basically paid volunteers. So it's tough. And we've used them for San Juan Street festivals before when the deputies aren't signing up. We have augmented our staff with those people, but to assign a extra help deputy sheriff to this is, and I would look to admin to look at that. It's a violation of the MOU.
Okay, well, we can explore that some other time.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all I had.
Okay, one, I want to thank staff, and my comments, please, know it's coming from where I see years and years of issues that have got us to this point. This is a conversation that's not new. I do agree with my colleagues up here. There has to be a different approach, and we have to have a different type of plan. But I really feel it needs to be a phased approach. You guys are saying scenario 3 is your recommendation, which is a 2-phased approach. I think it's even more than just 2 phases. I mean, one, the policy and the process of what we need to do needs to be clearly defined. You guys each stated what your roles are, but how your roles intertwine with each other has to be discussed. Because the only way this is going to be successful is if the plan is clear, the collaboration is with both cities, not just the county. We have to be able to know who starts and who stops. So I think this is a phenomenal start of a conversation. We need to talk about what can we do in a short interim phase right now to start making a statement that we will not be able to have encampments in our water supply. I'm just going to bring it down to the environmental side. If we start slowly, and I don't agree with the term aggressive services, sorry, no offense, but aggressive services hit the nerve on my spine going, that's not how services are. When you're dealing with people that are homeless and individuals with mental health issues, it is the last thing you want to do is be aggressive, but you need to be compassionate. And that compassion is a public-private partnership with the county, city, and nonprofits, the church, the faith-based groups. All of that has to come together. I am very supportive of the fact that we need a sheriff patrolling our regional parks. If we're going to have a regional park and a walkway and a pathway and expanding the wonderful things in our community to see, we're going to have law enforcement be part of that, or we will have a bigger problem because we're going to be inviting more, and that's not what we want to have happen. How this impacts the city is so important to address, and we have to have that dialogue. I'm looking at our list of committees, and the task force that we have on homeless is that I don't know enough. I've never been on it. I only know I appointed 2 supervisors to be on it. Tracy, can you kind of, I'm assuming you or one of you can discuss a little bit about that task force. What is the membership? When we talk about active participants versus, let's say, non-active participants, how do we ensure that we're getting full participation?
Sure. So just before I talk about the task force, we have had a couple meetings with the chief of police, with Carlos and a few of his team to talk about the partnership. And it's a work in progress. They, as Sheriff Taylor mentioned, they have done some of their own abatement in their areas. We've asked them to make sure that they involve us so that we can do outreach and offer services prior to the abatement effort. So it's a work in progress. We're trying to get them to come to the task force, to sit at the task force. We really need a commitment from everybody to be actively involved. Your name on a roster isn't helpful. We need active participants who are going to bring information to the table. Enrique and his team have led the task force for years now. We've changed the approach because before it was somewhat of just a kind of an update. Now we've made it more task-oriented. So I'm going to have him elaborate. We just had a meeting yesterday, and he can elaborate more on who they have.
Thank you, Tracy.
So the current structures of the homeless task force evolved from what used to be called the local service providers meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So really it was to convene those organizations, different department that provide services to homeless individuals, that we kind of just provided updates and looked at different dynamics. But, having this current structure as a result from a strategic planning session that took place about 3 years ago is, I think, a lot more focused to addressing the needs of our homeless community members. So as far as who is present, our goal is to have the appropriate departments, community-based organizations, different partners that have the ability to assess and make recommendations on what is working or what are the gaps in our community from data, such as a point-in-time census or other sources. I think presently there's opportunities for key players to be in this task force to help shape the direction of homeless services, because we are far ahead. And I know even though we have different programs and services, I think the best way to approach this is through certain decision makers that could really help lead and make recommendations to this board. So I think presently we are looking at who is attending and who is not, and how do we really bring together those that need to be on the board, on this task force, excuse me.
And has the task force bylaws and formation and membership, and has that all been clearly defined in this new 3 years ago you guys started this?
When we initially developed it, it gave direction. Over the course of the last 9 months, there has been redefining the goals and objectives of the task force, including its committee. So I think we have a structure, but I do think that there's still opportunities to improve that.
Okay.
Sure, and we're also working on some memorandums of understanding for the task force, because when we get into client-based information and start specifically talking about individuals, we really have to ensure that we have, that MDT structure set in place. We need your help, though. We need your help getting folks to show up. We need elected officials there. We need partnerships from the cities, San Juan Bautista, Hollister. We don't just need their funding. We need people who are decision makers who can really help us push this envelope a little bit further. That's our hope, to make it really a working task force. And it's a work in progress. I mean, we are really trying hard to get it moving. And we do have good participation from, I would say the most folks that show up are some of our community-based organizations that really show up and, help create the agenda to move it forward. We are creating a homeless kind of concern reporting line. That's just it's gonna have where you can leave any information. You can leave encampments that are popping up. You can leave, concerns about individuals that may be sitting on a corner that our team needs to go out. We outreach with behavioral health regularly. You maybe don't see us, but we really do it. In an effort to go down to the river is a little bit more complicated, as the sheriff mentioned. Access is difficult, and we need more presence there because it is a safety concern for our team. And so, we welcome any of you to come join us at a task force meeting. Supervisors Hotel has been, and we welcome any feedback too of other partners that need to be there.
Okay, so when it comes, so I'm not gonna belabor it, it has to be in collaboration with the cities. The cities have to be involved. And if we need to help support that, then I will do whatever I have to do to help support that.
If I could just mention, the mayor of the city of Hollister did attend yesterday, and she has been attending also the Safe Parking Committee, pretty consistent, so there is a level of presence.
Okay.
I think more consistency would be.
And it may be that we need to make it a higher priority, and have, alternates on this task force. So if supervisors that are on the task force are unable to attend, that we have alternates and that they're notified so that we always have a presence there. When it comes to lead agencies and lead staff, I think it is the most important thing. It has to be someone that's owning it. We have to have ownership of this. It cannot be the finger pointing across services and departments about who does what. So if we do invest in a deputy and we invest in a management analyst that is over this, the tasks and roles of that person are ensuring that the roles are defined, the MOUs are agreed upon, reminding people about task force meetings, but also getting other organizations and committees involved. The Pajaro River Watershed Flood Prevention Authority, having that presence and understanding of what we're working on and bringing that knowledge base should be very important. Also, Fish and Game Advisory Committee. I know my commissioner is always asking me, what's a new topic, or if the county gave us a project that we need to work on, we will focus on it for you. But we need to bring these groups together and utilize all of our community and our resources. So I do agree the property owner collaboration is a must. Is there a reason it can only be done once a year? You can't do a 5-year, so you're not doing it every year. Is there some law on that? And have we looked at the legality of acknowledgements that are done by the county clerk recorder's office versus a notary, and how we pull the notary pool into this, or people in our county that are notaries, that are employees of the county, and how we could have employees help facilitate if that has to happen?
So the 12-month deal is a law.
That sucks. Sorry. Oh.
And so I don't want to speak for Francisco, but I believe I know that he has one notary there.
Yeah.
And so our office also has a notary, and so I think that we're during business hours, be it to the county's discretion if they wanted to provide that for people, make it easier. I mean, I'm looking to make this easier than more difficult.
How do we make it easy? If we waive the fee of an acknowledgement or waive the notary fee, I mean, to be able to get these agreements done quickly.
And I think I got it from Barbara, in what I saw from not just the city of Hollister, city of Watsonville, and I think the city of Salinas. They are all requiring, and I believe the section says the document needs to be notarized. And then I think we're talking with David, we're gonna add a little checkbox to our trespass form that can get notarized that basically grants us that same 12 months of entry onto their property. So I kind of think that that's implied when they assign a trespass, for us to enforce trespassing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that extra layer of, I think that's what we were talking about, is like adding one more little box on there that just like expressly says, come on in my property and help us out. So
okay, so Supervisor Kosmicki brought up affordable housing. I think there's a whole topic that needs to be done about how affordable housing development is funded and how it happens in communities. I will tell you, I don't know one affordable housing project that a city or a county is not contributing to, because the affordability is not there. It's a prevailing wage job. It costs a fortune to build affordable housing. And I'm talking big affordable housing projects with transitional housing, including, first-time transition out of homelessness. But there are people that I think maybe we could possibly do some presentations to help all of us kind of understand that process. This is not a one-time problem. Cleaning it is not solving it. So I really think if we do this methodically with a plan and everyone's role defined, and we start chipping away at it, we're going to be more successful in the long term than a one-time cleanup that is going to cause services to be stretched thin, law enforcement, public works. I just feel like if we do too much, too fast, we're actually going to hurt ourselves and set ourselves back. What is the plan for funding? Because we got some big problems. And funding, I know there are 18 between cities and counties that the governor hand-selected on funding for removing encampments. How do we get a chunk of that money? How do we ensure that we are getting funding to help support the removal of encampments, and we're not just doing another thing on our taxpayers' dime instead of getting some funding from the state or the feds? I already talked about the environmental and the watershed, so that's all good. And my last thing is documentation is key. I'm gonna toot the GIS horn. The GIS mobile database and photos and documentation so that we aren't getting sued is the most important thing. And that means before, after, during, it's all documented in GIS. That database can be it's unlimited what you can put into that thing. Well, unless your server, capacity needs to be expanded. Besides that, I'm a big supporter of the future of the regional park. And the only way we're going to have a successful regional park is if we solve this encampment problem in the river. So, but we don't want to just push it to another location. That's where I'm at. I know you want to say something, don't you, Supervisor Kosmicki?
Can you give a shot at a recommendation whenever you're...
Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready.
I'm trying to encompass everybody, try to, compromise or whatever the word may be. I would propose, and please allow friendly amendments if necessary. I'd propose adopting the proposed enforcement policy with the following clarifications: supporting admin as the lead agency, supporting a 6-month review period as suggested by Supervisor Sotelo, immediately starting formal communications with private property owners to get consent for enforcement while working on a longer-term program to gain continuous consent as allowed. I'm going to support the recommended $352,000 in one-time funds for cleanup and storage with the use, initially at least, of contingency funds while exploring other options such as ARPA or other outside funding. I'm going to recommend supporting the $130,000 for the sheriff's office position. I'm willing to support if there's a willingness to move ahead on this now, and if staff comes back with options within the current budget to explore whether it's feasible to either cut back somewhere else, if at all possible. And then I'm going to recommend exploring all other possible options for outside funding for cleanup and abatement and personnel or other related matters with regard to this enforcement plan. I would recommend, at least for the interim, holding off on adding an administrative analyst. I'd like to assign one of the current administrative employees to make this a priority, and if other items have to be deprioritized, then that would so be it, at least in the interim while we assess the need and whether we want to come back and fund something. And then I'd recommend coming back at the following meeting with a specific timeline for when the enforcement initiative can begin, and moving ahead with scenario 3, but with the potential for modifications in a more fluid approach as we assess what works or doesn't work within that. And then lastly, to start formal communications with the city of Hollister to work toward cooperation to also adopt a similar enforcement policy.
Is that it?
That's it.
A second.
Okay, so now we can talk about it a little. I'll start with Supervisor Sotelo. I have some comments.
Thank you. I appreciate the resolution and all the things considered. I agree with the majority of it. I just want to make sure that we're not tying staff's hands as I think we're showing our support and giving kind of some direction. I don't know, do we want to be so specific in this resolution, or do we want to just kind of give direction and then ask for some of this to come back, right? So like looking at exploring kind of the options for funding and where we're going to come up with supporting these different positions. I obviously, I said I'm supportive of the sheriff's position. However, I'm also really supportive of the administration, that position. I think if we're going to do this and all things considered and how complex it's going to be, I think it is, everybody's kind of already doing a lot. And so I would like to see that other item, but maybe it's not feasible, but I would like staff to take a look at it and almost kind of come back to us with a suggestion rather than us putting it in this resolution. So those are kind of my comments with it. Thank you.
Supervisor Gonzalez?
There's so much to address. I don't even know how and where to address it. So continue on, ladies.
Okay, so my biggest concern is also making this successful and knowing how much this is going to cost. We need to have it brought back. The cost, because I think that management analyst or whatever the position is, the coordinator, has to be the key in the success of this. Putting it on any of your staff right now, I think what we'd be removing of what they're working on, it would be too much. And it would kind of set us up for failure. I really think setting this up for success is really understanding how much it's gonna cost and funding it. Now, I have no problem with looking at ARPA money and redirecting some ARPA money because this will only benefit parks. This will only benefit the future of our community. So if we can get some money from ARPA to start this process, I'm good with that. What I don't want to do is say, go do it and not have the plan. I feel like we have a conversation started, but we don't have a full plan. Now, that's why I think it really needs to be multiple phases. I totally support the sheriff's deputy coming on board. If we can get funding for that, how? Because we've got other things that are almost as, I won't say as important, but almost as important, if not equal to importance. How do we make sure that we phase it right now, that you're getting support, but then you're starting to collaborate and we start to chip away? Like your sheriff's deputies go down there and we start doing the first, notices on one encampment and work with Tracy's group and Dana's group from HHSA and behavioral health and start to form what the policy is of whose role is what and at what point do you, because I feel like if we don't have a clear plan, things are going to slip through the cracks. Individuals are going to get scared. We need to think about the compassion side. But if we have the plan and we have the coordination and the commitment of this board, which I think we do, then we can make this very successful and it will be long-term success, not just a one cleanup. Because I have seen these cleanups before and they don't last. We need a program that is life-standing. I mean, it's forever. We will always have this in place. That's where I'm at.
Madam Chair, can I piggyback?
Yes, please.
And just add, if we come back to have several options for the administrative side of it, which would include the use of a current administrative analyst, also the cost of an additional person, but then a third option would be to, because a lot of this is at the outset, and maybe it can be handed off, that we look at the cost of a consultant to potentially oversee the starting up of this process and establishing a plan and getting it moving.
I like that. I like that a lot. I really do, because if we have somebody that this is their focus and they're contracted to make this plan for us, and then we see what the recommendations are and where it should be, if it's admin or an added position or not, I think that I would support that as a friendly amendment to your very long motion.
Yes, great. All those items, but just as far as the position, the administrative position, that we'd come back with three options: the cost of an additional person, the cost of the possibility of some level of a consultant to help manage this process for a set period of time at the outset, and then lastly, using an existing administrator or handing off the leadership of the process to an administrator after a consultant starts the work.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I may add, I'm just kind of concerned about the timeline. If we give a strict timeline in which we're expecting all this to happen, we're going to set ourselves up for failure. And so we need to make sure that it's realistic and it's achievable and measurable. I like the idea about the consultant, someone who specializes in this area, because I imagine there's an expert out there somewhere. I'm just concerned about the finance that it's going to take to hire this individual. But again, this isn't a unique problem. Other communities are experiencing it, so I'm sure somebody has found some way to monetize their expertise and help us, similar municipalities that are in this situation. I'm just concerned about the time frame, that we make it not too constraining, but it's achievable.
And Madam Chair, if I may, other communities have done this. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look at what other communities have done. I know there are larger jurisdictions that have more resources than we do, but there are models out there for getting this going. I would just really strongly encourage that we come back with a plan, whether it's the next meeting or maybe the meeting after, that sets forth how this is all going to roll out, along with the timeline. The timeline is important. I just want to make sure that we do get started with this and make it a priority and get moving on it as soon as possible, because the winter's around the corner. Thank you.
Oh, come on, you can come up. We haven't done I think we got the friendly amendment in there, right? Did that get documented? Okay, good.
So I'm not looking to amend anything. I just want to make sure, because we're going back to this lead agency thing, and one thing that our CAO left out is that one of the people that was communicating with her gave her a sad face emoji when they said there was an admin But the issue is, I know we are actually all working really well together. And we all have an area of expertise that we're all willing to take on. I've watched Selena step up and offer like way more than I think she needs to be offering to do this stuff. Where we're talking about the lead agency, I think where you have some heartburn with your department heads, is it because there is this overarching contracts, towing contract, hazardous waste cleanup contract, this contract, that contract. We thought it was going to be so splintered as to, well, the sheriff's office is not going to go out and get a hazardous waste contract. I never knew about whatever that crazy acronym you guys are using now, that they need this certain certification. So I think that we're just looking to have one clearinghouse that's going to hold all these contracts, because there's going to be a cost to it, that it's going to be weird about where is it going to fit in our budgets with these splintered contracts. But what I had told the group, and what I'll tell you, and I don't want this to sound conditional, it's just being realistic. Let's say that we funded a deputy sheriff position and we put him into this role. What we are really good at is coming up with operations plans, identifying problem areas, bringing people together, doing enforcement, coordinating cleanups, coordinating efforts. And this deputy sheriff would be able to do that. And if that needs to go into an MOU to say that we would be the lead on that type of stuff, about making sure that we have HHSA support on this day or this operation, and we do that already. It's more of the contract, the weight of these contracts that I think most of your department heads, at least me, we're worried about, like who's going to coordinate that. And that's where we felt it should sit in admin, because they could be the keeper of all those contracts on an ongoing basis. And then we could do the busy work on the ground as opposed to trying to manage that whole system. So I think a little bit, Supervisor Kosmicki, as we move forward, I do envision that once we get this going and we're staying on top of it, I do envision a lot of it's going to fall on the sheriff's office in coordination with integrated waste and everybody else. But I think that if we're out there all the time and we're seeing what's happening, then we're going to be tasked with coordinating the response. But it's just hard to say that we could just take the whole thing on right now because the contractual thing. So that was a long-winded way to explain that to you, but I just want you to know, like, I do think we are all really working together, and we're not trying to point fingers at each other. It's just we're all collectively pointing at Henny right now. Just kidding.
I'm gonna also, because you brought up a very valid point about the coordination of contracts, and if administration, if it's the will of the board, if administration could coordinate also looking at our new contract procurement program, and maybe this is something that in the interim, since we are working on a new program that maybe Barbara could assist in with county council supporting administration, so that we can get the system down, the contracts in place, and then if the consultant makes the recommendation of if it's the sheriff, whomever it is, or if it's integrated waste, I think that outside perspective and experience from another entity would be great. It's my only 2 cents. Yep, Supervisor Sotelo.
So I'm still kind of concerned on how complex we've made this resolution with this much direction, and I'm just wondering if we should, kind of approve it in the concept of, okay, you've heard all of our feedback. Now, it doesn't make sense. We don't have enough time to bring it back next week, but maybe the following meeting, if we could, come back with kind of all these considerations and kind of a plan so that we could adopt it formally. I'm just wondering if there's some time that staff needs to kind of work some of these different things out. I mean, on some of them, we've got explore options, I don't know. I'm just wondering if we're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I think you've heard a lot of where we're all coming from and what's really important to all of us. And I think with kind of the items that were included in the resolution, I think we're pretty much all really supportive with, but I would like to see kind of the plan and the formal wording of it coming back to us. So just my 2 cents. It looks like Henny has something to say.
Yes.
Yeah, so the costing part that can be done and get that in time, it's the consultant part that would take time, is finding if that's the route we go. So, and who, and then what their timing is and things like that. So that's my only consideration or reservation a little bit there. Not that that's not possible. There's other agencies I can talk to that probably have done the same thing. And so it could take a little bit of time. So I just want to make sure that is out there.
Okay, Tracy, and then I'll come to you.
I make a
suggestion?
Yes, please.
Can you allow the work group after this meeting to go back and talk about some of the ideas? I fear with a consultant that it's an outside entity, and I really feel like we need to take ownership. I really feel like it needs to be a county employee that is part of our team. Consultants are not part of our team. Sorry, we can't direct their work. They can't sit with us. There's a rule around consultants and contractors. So I think maybe if we go back as our work group and kind of talk about some of the ideas that we've talked about and figure out what we feel is the best. Look at the funding. Where's the funding? Dana and I need to look at our budgets to see where we're at, to see if we can be partners, see where we're at with the ARPA funding, and then bring it back to the board for consideration. That would be my suggestion.
How much time are you looking at to have this meeting?
First meeting in November?
I was going to say first meeting in November. Is that possible?
November
12th?
Is that a Tuesday?
That's
my son's
Tuesday.
birthday. It's my son's birthday. I don't know.
We'll wish him a happy birthday.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I may, is it possible to explore options for a subvention-funded position if we are going the route of having a full-time employee handle this, or a part-time employee? And maybe a part-time employee should be an option as well?
Subvented funds.
Outside funding, so HHS, federal funding, state funding.
To pay for
so that we don't have to
admin
use the
position?
general fund for the position to handle the oversight.
We can definitely look at it.
Okay.
I'm not sure we can do an FTE for an admin position, but we can definitely look and see if we have any funding that we could possibly.
But even like a part-time position maybe would be appropriate for something like
We will
this.
definitely look.
Whether it's somebody who's retired that's willing to come back part-time or something, because I don't necessarily foresee this as a full-time position.
Yeah, absolutely, we can explore that.
So November the 1st, you said, or November the 12th,
12th,
sorry?
yeah.
12th? Okay.
But I also want to just say that in the meantime, we will be making active efforts at the river to advise them that this will be coming. We will schedule some outreach events and partner with our law enforcement as well as behavioral health and go out there and start messaging that this is coming.
Great.
Okay, so we had a first and a second. We got a lot of dialogue. Were you making an amendment to not move to approve and bring it back?
Madam
Is that your
Chair,
friendly amendment?
Can I just be concise of
Yep.
all that, everything I stated, under the guise that we're gonna come back on November 12th with a more, formalized recommendation after the work group meets with other options for funding.
I like that friendly amendment. All in
Thank you.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Good job, team. Thank you guys so much.
Need a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Okay, bye.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.